Is something strange about the most powerful, confident men. They don't move in big crowds. They're not the loudest in the room, surrounded by people laughing at every joke. In fact, many of them walk alone, or with just a few trusted people by their side. And yet, they're the ones everyone quietly respects. They carry themselves with a calm strength, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be announced. No flashy smiles, no desperate need to fit in. Just unshakable, unbothered, unbreakable. Why is that? Because a man with no friends, or just a very small circle, is often the most secure man you'll ever meet. He doesn't need to be liked by everyone. He doesn't need constant attention, validation, or the noise of shallow friendships to feel important. His confidence isn't rented from others. It's built within. This isn't just about solitude. This is about a kind of freedom most people will never understand. The freedom to be unmanipulated because you don't crave approval. The freedom to be fearless because you faced yourself in silence and survived. The freedom to live life on your own terms without asking for permission. But here's the secret most people never realize. Being alone doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful if you know how to master it. In this guide, we're going to break down the lessons that can change your life forever. Lessons about why the man who stands alone often stands the tallest. Lessons about how true strength isn't found in the crowd. It's forged in solitude. Lessons that will show you how to become secure, unshakable, and untouchable, ready to find out why a man with no friends, or just a select few, is the most powerful man in the room. But what exactly makes solitude so powerful? Why do some men crumble without constant companionship, while others thrive in silence, growing stronger with every passing day? The answer isn't just about being alone. It's about what happens when there's no one left to distract you from the most important person you'll ever meet, yourself. Solitude isn't an absence. It's a presence. The presence of clarity, the presence of self-awareness, the presence of raw, unfiltered truth. In the absence of noise, you hear what really matters. And in that silence, you either break or you build. This is where the real transformation begins. The strength found in solitude is unlike any other. It's not loud. It doesn't seek attention. It's the kind of strength that's invisible to those who've never tasted it, but undeniable to those who have. When you stand alone, without the safety net of others' opinions, you face the hardest and most liberating truths about who you are. The man who masters solitude becomes unbreakable because he has no weak points for the world to target. He's not dependent on anyone's approval. His self-worth isn't tied to someone else's presence. He's whole on his own. When you no longer fear being alone, you become free. Free from manipulation. Free from the anxiety of fitting in. Free from the exhausting game of trying to be everything to everyone. This freedom isn't a gift. It's earned. It's the result of standing face to face with solitude and refusing to flinch. Solitude reveals your flaws, but it also reveals your strengths. It strips away the masks, leaving you with nothing but your raw, authentic self. And when you learn to sit with that version of you, not out of necessity, but out of choice, you unlock a level of power that's untouchable. Most people think they're afraid of being alone, but what they're really afraid of is meeting themselves without distractions, without the comforting echo of someone else's voice to drown out their own doubts. But the Stoic man, he doesn't just meet himself. He studies, understands, and ultimately masters himself. This mastery is the foundation of true strength. It's not built in crowded rooms or noisy conversations. It's built in the quiet, in the spaces where there's no one to impress, no one to perform for, just you, your thoughts, and the discipline to face them head-on. When you embrace solitude, you stop looking outward for answers. You start looking inward, and that's where you find the kind of wisdom no one can give you, the kind of strength no one can take from you. Solitude teaches you that you are enough, not because someone told you so, but because you discovered it on your own. That realization is unshakable. It's the reason why the man who stands alone doesn't crumble. He doesn't lean on others because he's built a foundation within himself that's stronger than any support someone else could offer. This strength isn't about rejecting people. It's about not needing them to feel whole. It's about choosing connections out of desire, not desperation. When you no longer fear being alone, you choose your company wisely. You don't tolerate relationships that drain you because you know solitude isn't a punishment. It's a privilege. In solitude, you also discover the beauty of self-reliance. You become your own motivator, your own problem solver, your own source of comfort. This doesn't mean shutting the world out. It means knowing that even if the world does shut you out, you'll be just fine. While others seek distractions to avoid their thoughts, you sit with yours, no matter how uncomfortable. That's not weakness, that's courage. The courage to face your fears without running. The courage to confront your insecurities without hiding behind someone else's presence. The courage to know yourself so deeply that no one else's opinion can shake you. This kind of strength is rare because most people are too afraid to chase it. They think comfort is found in crowds, but real comfort is knowing that you're solid, even when you're standing alone. And that's the paradox. When you no longer need anyone, you become the kind of person everyone is drawn to. Not because you seek their approval, but because people can sense the security of someone who's mastered himself. Solitude sharpens your mind. Without constant chatter, your thoughts become clearer. You start to understand not just what you think, but why you think it. You begin to separate your own beliefs from the noise you've absorbed from others. This clarity is powerful because it helps you make decisions based on your values, not on fleeting emotions or outside pressure. When you master solitude, you no longer react out of fear. You respond with intention. You're not driven by the need to fit in or be liked. You're guided by principles, by a deep understanding of who you are and what matters to you. That's why a man who stands alone can't be easily influenced. He's anchored in something deeper than the approval of the crowd. Solitude also teaches patience. When you're not constantly stimulated by others, you learn to sit with boredom, to find contentment in the simple act of being. This patience isn't passive, it's active discipline, the ability to wait, to observe, to hold your ground without the need for instant gratification. And from this patience comes resilience. Life will test you. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will change. But if you've built your strength in solitude, none of that can break you. You've already faced the hardest battles, the ones within your own mind. External challenges become easier because you've trained yourself to be calm in the storm, steady when everything around you is falling apart. There's also a unique kind of freedom that comes with solitude, the freedom to be completely honest with yourself. In the absence of an audience, there's no need to perform, no pretending to be stronger, happier, or more successful than you are. Just the raw, unfiltered truth. And in that truth, you find authenticity. Authenticity is the backbone of self-confidence. When you know who you are, when you've faced your flaws and embraced your strengths, you walk through life differently. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're not threatened by criticism because your self-worth isn't fragile. It's built on solid ground. This doesn't mean you never feel doubt or fear. It means you don't let those feelings control you. You've learned to sit with discomfort without letting it define you. You've faced the parts of yourself that most people spend their lives avoiding. And in doing so, you've built a kind of armor, not the kind that hides your vulnerabilities, but the kind that makes you strong enough to show them without fear. Solitude isn't about isolation. It's about connection, the deepest connection you can have, not with the world, but with yourself. When you're secure in who you are, you attract relationships that are based on mutual respect, not neediness. You set boundaries without guilt because you understand that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. The world often tells us that being alone is something to fear, a sign that something's wrong. But the truth is, being able to stand alone is one of the greatest signs of strength. It means you've done the work. You've faced the silence and found peace within it. And here's the thing, when you master solitude, you never really feel alone, because you're always in the company of someone you trust completely, yourself. That's the ultimate security, not in having a crowd around you, but in knowing that even if the crowd disappears, you're still solid. So, what's stopping most people from embracing solitude? Fear. Fear of what they might find when there's no one left to distract them. Fear of facing their own thoughts without a buffer. But that fear is exactly why solitude is so powerful. It's the place where real growth happens, where illusions are stripped away, and the truth is laid bare. And once you've faced that truth, once you've stood alone and realized you're still standing, you become unbreakable. Because nothing outside of you has power over you anymore. Not rejection, not loneliness, not the opinions of others. You've already faced the hardest thing there is, yourself, and you've come out stronger. This is the Stoic strength of solitude. It's not about rejecting the world. It's about mastering yourself so completely that the world can't shake you. It's about finding peace, purpose, and power in the one place most people are too afraid to look, within. But the journey doesn't end with mastering solitude. In fact, solitude reveals the next critical lesson, a lesson many never learn because they're too busy chasing approval from the world around them. When you've stood alone long enough, you start to notice something. The world is obsessed with validation. People crave attention, applause, and recognition, like it's the air they breathe. But here's the truth that few understand. The need for approval is the greatest prison of all. The man who is truly free isn't the one with the loudest applause or the biggest following. He's the man who doesn't care whether the crowd cheers or stays silent. His sense of worth isn't rented from other people's opinions. It's built, brick by brick, within himself. This is where self-sufficiency comes in, not just as a skill, but as a way of life. Self-sufficiency isn't about growing your own food or living off the grid. It's about not outsourcing your sense of value to anyone else. It's about waking up every day, knowing exactly who you are, without needing someone to remind you. Most people spend their lives performing. Every action, every word, every choice, carefully crafted to fit someone else's expectations. They dress for approval, they speak for acceptance, they live for applause. But what happens when the applause stops? When the likes fade, the compliments dry up, and the people they tried so hard to impress move on? They crumble, because their sense of worth wasn't real, it was borrowed. But the Stoic man? He doesn't borrow. He builds. His confidence isn't fragile because it's not dependent on outside forces. It comes from within. That's the blueprint for inner peace, learning to stand so firm in who you are that no one's opinion can shake you. The first step to self-sufficiency is understanding the trap of social approval. The need to be liked is a silent addiction, disguised as connection. It starts small, a compliment here, a nod of approval there, but soon it becomes a habit. You begin adjusting your behavior to get more of it, losing pieces of yourself with every compromise. Before you know it, you're living a life designed by everyone except you. The Stoics understood this danger well. They taught that external validation is fleeting, like chasing shadows. What's praised today may be ridiculed tomorrow. The crowd's opinion is a moving target, impossible to hit consistently. So, why aim for it at all? Instead, aim for something solid, your own standards. Not the standards set by society, friends, or trends, but the values you've chosen for yourself. Integrity, discipline, honesty, courage. These don't need applause. They stand on their own. When you shift your focus from seeking approval to living by your principles, something incredible happens. You become untouchable. Criticism loses its sting because it doesn't define you. Praise feels nice, but it doesn't inflate your ego because you were whole before you received it. You're no longer on an emotional roller coaster, rising and falling based on what others think. You become steady, grounded, unshakable. But here's the challenge. Self-sufficiency requires brutal honesty. It demands that you confront the parts of yourself that secretly crave validation. It forces you to ask hard questions. Am I doing this because it aligns with my values or because I want to be liked? Would I still choose this path if no one ever noticed? These questions are uncomfortable because they expose the areas where we're still seeking approval. But discomfort is a good sign. It means you're digging beneath the surface, uncovering the truth. The next step is learning to be your own validator. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of feedback. It means developing an inner compass so strong that external opinions are just background noise. You listen, but you're not defined by them. You're open to growth, but you don't need someone else's permission to feel worthy. How do you build this inner compass? It starts with setting personal standards that matter to you. What does success mean to you? Not what society says, but what feels right in your core. What values do you refuse to compromise, even when no one's watching? When you answer these questions, you create a framework for your life that's immune to external pressure. Self-sufficiency also means learning to enjoy your own company. Not just tolerate it, but genuinely find peace in being alone with your thoughts. This is where solitude and self-validation intertwine. When you're comfortable with yourself, you don't need constant distractions or affirmations to feel complete. You're not lonely when you're alone because you're with someone you trust, yourself. Another critical aspect of self-sufficiency is emotional regulation. People often rely on others to manage their emotions, to make them feel better, to boost their confidence, to validate their feelings. But when you're emotionally self-sufficient, you take full responsibility for your inner state. You don't hand over the keys to your happiness or peace to anyone else. This doesn't mean shutting people out. It means not being dependent on them for your sense of well-being. You can appreciate support without needing it to survive. You can value relationships without them being the foundation of your identity. It's also important to recognize the subtle ways we seek approval without realizing it. The need to explain ourselves excessively, the fear of saying no, the hesitation to express unpopular opinions. All of these are signs that we're still attached to external validation. Breaking free from this requires courage. The courage to be misunderstood, the courage to disappoint people, the courage to stand firm in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And here's the paradox. The less you seek approval, the more respect you naturally earn. People are drawn to those who are unapologetically themselves because it's rare. Authenticity is magnetic. When you're not trying to fit in, you stand out. Not because you're performing, but because you're genuine. Self-sufficiency also changes the way you handle criticism. Instead of taking it personally, you evaluate it objectively. Is there truth in this feedback? If yes, you learn and improve. If not, you let it go without drama. You don't spiral into self-doubt because your worth isn't on the line. You know who you are, and one person's opinion doesn't define that. Another powerful shift happens in your relationships. When you no longer seek validation, you stop tolerating toxic dynamics. You're not afraid to walk away from people who don't respect your boundaries because you're not afraid of being alone. You choose connections based on mutual respect, not emotional dependency. This independence is liberating. You're no longer a hostage to someone's approval, affection, or attention. You're not manipulated by guilt, fear, or the need to be liked. You make decisions based on what's right, not what's popular. That's true freedom. But self-sufficiency isn't a destination, it's a practice. There will be moments when old patterns resurface, when the urge for approval creeps back in. That's normal. The key is awareness. Notice it without judgment, then realign with your values. It's not about never seeking validation, it's about not needing it. Over time, this practice reshapes your identity. You become someone who is deeply rooted, whose confidence isn't fragile, whose peace isn't easily disturbed. You live with integrity, not because you want to be seen as a good person, but because that's who you choose to be, regardless of who's watching. And this self-sufficiency extends beyond personal life. It impacts your work, your ambitions, your entire worldview. You're not chasing success to prove something to others. You define success on your terms. You pursue goals that align with your purpose, not just what's considered impressive. This clarity simplifies life. You're not constantly second-guessing, wondering if you're good enough, or comparing yourself to others. You move with quiet confidence, focused on what matters to you. Challenges don't shake you because your foundation isn't external. It's within. Ultimately, self-sufficiency is about reclaiming your power, the power to define yourself, the power to live authentically, the power to stand tall, even when you stand alone. And when you reach this place, you realize something profound. You were never lacking. You just needed to stop looking outside for what was always inside. Your worth, your strength, your peace. It was yours all along. When you no longer seek validation from others, a new kind of power begins to grow within you, one that thrives not in noise, but in stillness. It's the quiet moments, the pauses between the chaos, where something extraordinary happens. While the world rushes to speak, to prove, to shout louder just to be heard, there exists a different kind of strength, the wisdom of silence. Silence is often misunderstood. People think it's emptiness, a void waiting to be filled with words, opinions, or noise. But silence isn't emptiness, it's space. Space for clarity to rise, for reflection to deepen, and for resilience to be born. In fact, silence is one of the most powerful tools a Stoic mind can master. It's where thoughts settle, emotions calm, and truth reveals itself without the distortion of external influence. When you embrace silence, you're not avoiding life. You're connecting to it more deeply. You're tuning out the distractions that pull you in every direction and focusing on what truly matters. Silence strips away the unnecessary, leaving only what's real, what's true. It's where you hear the voice that often gets drowned out by the noise of the world, your own. Silence teaches patience. In a world addicted to instant reactions and quick responses, the ability to pause before speaking, to sit with your thoughts before acting, is rare. It's easy to react in the heat of the moment, driven by emotion or impulse. But true wisdom lies in the pause, the brief silence where you choose your response with intention, rather than letting your emotions dictate your actions. This kind of control doesn't just happen. It's cultivated through the discipline of silence. The more you practice being still, the more comfortable you become with discomfort. Most people are terrified of silence because it forces them to face themselves without distractions. But when you learn to sit quietly, without needing to fill the space with words or noise, you discover a deep reservoir of strength within. Silence also sharpens your perception. When you're not busy talking, you start noticing things you'd otherwise miss. The subtle changes in someone's tone, the emotions behind their words, the unspoken truths hidden between sentences. You become more attuned to the world around you, not because you're doing more, but because you're listening more deeply. There's a certain power in being the quietest person in the room. While others are busy trying to be heard, you observe, you analyze, and you understand. You don't waste energy proving a point because your confidence doesn't come from external validation. It comes from within. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means when you do, your words carry weight because they're chosen with care, not thrown out carelessly. Silence is also a sanctuary. It's where you retreat when the world becomes overwhelming, not to escape, but to recharge. In silence, you process your experiences, reflect on your choices, and reconnect with your values. It's in these quiet moments that clarity emerges, showing you the path forward without the distortion of external noise. But silence isn't just about being quiet. It's about cultivating an inner stillness that remains even when life gets loud. You could be surrounded by chaos and still carry a sense of peace within you. That's the essence of Stoic resilience, not the absence of challenges, but the ability to remain unshaken by them. Practicing silence also helps you develop emotional mastery. Instead of reacting to every trigger, you learn to sit with your emotions, observing them without judgment. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means understanding them deeply, allowing them to rise and fall without letting them control your actions. In silence, emotions lose their grip because you're no longer feeding them with constant reactivity. Silence also reveals what truly matters. When you remove the noise, you're left with the essentials, your thoughts, your values, your purpose. This clarity helps you make decisions that align with your principles rather than being swayed by fleeting emotions or external pressures. You stop chasing things that don't matter because silence has shown you what does. In conversations, silence is a powerful tool. People often rush to fill gaps in dialogue, afraid of awkwardness or discomfort. But those gaps can be where the most meaningful insights emerge. When you allow silence to exist in a conversation, it creates space for reflection, for deeper truths to surface. It shows that you're not just waiting to speak, you're genuinely listening. Silence also teaches humility. It reminds you that you don't need to have all the answers, that wisdom often comes from listening rather than speaking. In a world that rewards loud opinions and quick takes, the humility to pause, to reflect, and to say nothing when nothing needs to be said is rare and valuable. Moreover, silence can be an act of strength in conflicts. When faced with provocation, the instinct is to defend, to retaliate, to prove a point. But sometimes the most powerful response is no response. Not because you're weak, but because you've chosen not to waste energy on what doesn't deserve it. Silence, in these moments, is the ultimate display of control. On a deeper level, silence connects you to the present moment. Without the constant distraction of noise, you become more aware of your surroundings, your body, your breath. This mindfulness anchors you, reducing stress and anxiety because you're not lost in regrets of the past or fears of the future. You're here, now, fully present. Silence also fosters creativity. When the mind isn't bombarded with external stimuli, it starts to wander, to explore, to connect ideas in new ways. Some of the greatest insights and breakthroughs come not from constant thinking, but from moments of stillness where the mind can breathe. And perhaps most importantly, silence helps you build a relationship with yourself. It's in the quiet moments that you confront your fears, your doubts, your dreams. You learn to be your own companion, to find comfort not in the presence of others, but in the depth of your own self-awareness. This self-connection is the foundation of confidence that doesn't waver, even when you're alone. But cultivating the wisdom of silence requires practice. Start by embracing small moments of quiet, turning off the noise, sitting with your thoughts, resisting the urge to fill every gap with words. Notice how uncomfortable it feels at first, and then notice how that discomfort fades as you become more familiar with stillness. Over time, you'll find that silence isn't empty. It's full of insights, clarity, and strength. It's not a void, it's a space where growth happens, where you learn not just to hear the world, but to understand it. Not just to exist, but to live with intention. In silence, you discover that you are enough, not because someone else said so, but because in the absence of everything else, you found yourself. That's the wisdom of silence. And once you've experienced it, you'll never see the world the same way again. Silence reshapes your interactions with others as well. When you speak less, you listen more, not just to words, but to the spaces in between. You begin to hear what people aren't saying, to sense emotions hidden beneath the surface. This deeper level of understanding strengthens relationships because people feel truly heard, often for the first time. In leadership, silence is a mark of confidence. A leader who speaks only when necessary commands more respect because their words carry weight. They don't need to fill every moment with noise to assert authority. Their presence speaks louder than their voice ever could. This kind of silent leadership is rooted in authenticity and self-assurance. In moments of decision-making, silence provides clarity. Instead of rushing into choices fueled by pressure or emotion, a pause allows you to assess with a clear mind. It's in these quiet spaces that you connect with your intuition, recognizing insights that would be drowned out in constant chatter. Silence also reveals the transient nature of external circumstances. When you're not constantly reacting to life, you see how emotions rise and fall like waves, temporary, fleeting. This awareness helps you navigate challenges with a steady heart, knowing that both joy and sorrow will pass. You become anchored not in the shifting tides, but in the calm depth beneath. On a spiritual level, silence is transformative. It's where you confront the questions that don't have easy answers. Who am I beyond my roles, achievements, and relationships? What truly matters when everything else is stripped away? These aren't questions you answer with words, but with presence, with stillness. In relationships, silence teaches you to be fully present. Not every moment needs to be filled with conversation. Sometimes, sitting in comfortable silence with someone speaks volumes about the depth of your connection. It's in these wordless moments that you feel most seen, most understood, not because of what's said, but because of what's shared in the quiet. Silence is also a form of respect. Respect for yourself, for others, and for life itself. It's the recognition that not every thought needs to be voiced, not every opinion needs to be shared. Some things are more powerful when left unsaid, allowing space for reflection and growth. In the face of adversity, silence is resilience. When the world expects you to react, to defend, to explain, choosing silence is an act of defiance. It's a statement that you don't owe anyone an emotional reaction, that your peace is not up for negotiation. Ultimately, the wisdom of silence is about mastering your inner world. It's not about muting your voice, but about amplifying your understanding. When you cultivate silence, you don't lose connection, you deepen it. You don't escape life, you engage with it more fully. And in this quiet space, you find something priceless. The clarity to see who you truly are, the strength to stand firm in that truth, and the peace that comes from knowing you need nothing more. Silence isn't emptiness. It's everything. Silence teaches us the art of listening, not just to the world, but to ourselves. It strips away the noise, leaving us face to face with our raw, unfiltered thoughts. But beyond silence lies an even deeper space, solitude. Where silence quiets the world, solitude invites us inward. It's the space where we're left with no one to impress, no performance to maintain, and no distractions to hide behind. And in that space, something profound happens. We either feel the emptiness of loneliness or the fullness of being whole on our own. Loneliness and solitude may seem similar, but they couldn't be more different. Loneliness is a craving, a sense of absence, a void that feels heavy. It's the ache of wanting something or someone to fill the gaps within. But solitude is the opposite. It's not about absence, it's about presence, the presence of self. It's the ability to stand alone without feeling incomplete. It's the realization that you are not a half looking for your other half. You are whole. Most people fear solitude because they've only known it as loneliness. They associate being alone with being unwanted, unnoticed, or unloved. But that fear doesn't come from solitude itself. It comes from what's left when external distractions are gone. It's not the silence that's unsettling, it's meeting yourself without filters. The truth is, if you feel empty when you're alone, it's not because of the absence of others, it's because of the absence of connection with yourself. Loneliness is a symptom of disconnection, not from people, but from your own inner world. When you haven't built that relationship with yourself, solitude feels like a punishment. But when you've done the inner work, solitude feels like peace. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't seek solitude to escape the world. They embraced it to connect more honestly with themselves. Because in solitude, there's no pretending. You can't wear masks when no one's watching. You can't be distracted by applause when the room is empty. What's left is the truth about your thoughts, your values, your fears, your strengths. Solitude becomes powerful when you stop seeing it as something that happens to you and start seeing it as something you choose. It's not about isolation or rejecting others. It's about choosing to spend time with the one person you'll be with for the rest of your life, yourself. That's not loneliness. That's self-respect. To be whole on your own doesn't mean you don't value relationships. It means you don't depend on them to feel complete. You can enjoy connection without being defined by it. You can love deeply without losing yourself, because your foundation is already solid. The shift from loneliness to solitude starts with perspective. When you're alone, do you focus on what's missing or on what's present? Loneliness fixates on absence. Solitude appreciates presence, the presence of time, space, freedom, and the opportunity to explore your inner landscape without interruption. Solitude also reveals the difference between needing people and choosing them. When you're uncomfortable being alone, relationships can become a crutch, a way to avoid facing yourself. But when you're at peace with solitude, relationships become something you choose from a place of wholeness, not from a place of lack. You're not filling a void, you're sharing an abundance. This changes everything. You no longer tolerate toxic connections out of fear of being alone. You don't cling to relationships just to avoid emptiness. You're not afraid to walk away when something doesn't align with your values, because your sense of self isn't tied to anyone else's presence. You know that you are enough, with or without company. In solitude, you also gain clarity. Without the noise of constant interaction, you can hear your own thoughts clearly. You can reflect on your choices, your patterns, your goals. You start to distinguish between what you truly want and what you've been conditioned to want. This clarity helps you live more intentionally, making decisions that align with your authentic self rather than chasing external validation. Solitude fosters self-reliance. You become your own source of comfort, motivation, and validation. You don't need constant reassurance from others because you've built that reassurance within. This doesn't mean you never struggle. It means you trust yourself to navigate those struggles without falling apart. One of the most beautiful aspects of solitude is the freedom it brings. You're not performing. You're not managing perceptions. You're just being. There's no pressure to meet anyone's expectations. No need to explain yourself. No fear of judgment. It's liberating because you can exist authentically without compromise. But solitude isn't just about being physically alone. It's a mindset. You can feel lonely in a crowded room if you're disconnected from yourself. Conversely, you can feel deeply connected in solitude if you've nurtured that inner relationship. Solitude isn't about the absence of people. It's about the presence of peace. To cultivate the art of being whole on your own, start by embracing small moments of solitude. Turn off the distractions. Sit with your thoughts. Notice the discomfort without trying to escape it. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to face when I'm alone? Often, the discomfort isn't the solitude itself. It's what it reveals. Instead of filling every quiet moment with noise, allow yourself to be still. Instead of reaching for your phone when boredom creeps in, explore the boredom. What's beneath it? What emotions surface when there's nothing to distract you? These moments are opportunities to get to know yourself on a deeper level. Journaling can be a powerful practice in solitude. Writing down your thoughts helps you observe them without judgment. It creates a dialogue with yourself, where you can explore your fears, dreams, and values honestly. Over time, this practice deepens your self-awareness and strengthens your connection to yourself. Another practice is spending time in nature without distractions. Nature has a way of grounding us, reminding us of the simplicity of existence beyond human noise. in the stillness of a forest, by the rhythm of ocean waves, or under a vast sky, you realize how small your worries are and how vast your inner world can be. Meditation is also a tool for embracing solitude. It teaches you to sit with your mind without needing to control or escape it. You observe your thoughts like passing clouds, without judgment, without attachment. This practice builds mental resilience and helps you become comfortable with your own presence. The more you lean into solitude, the more you discover about yourself. You learn what energizes you, what drains you, what values truly matter to you. You become your own source of wisdom because you've taken the time to listen, not to the world's noise, but to your own inner voice. And here's the paradox. The more whole you become on your own, the richer your relationships with others become. You're not entering connections from a place of neediness or fear. You're not seeking someone to complete you. You're already complete. And from that place of fullness, you can give and receive love without conditions, without attachment, without losing yourself. Solitude also teaches you the value of boundaries. When you're comfortable being alone, you're not afraid to set limits with others. You don't tolerate disrespect just to avoid conflict. You don't compromise your values to fit in. You protect your peace because you've learned how precious it is. In solitude, you discover that happiness isn't something you find in others. It's something you create within. You're not dependent on external circumstances to feel fulfilled. You carry your peace with you because it's rooted in who you are, not in what's happening around you. This kind of inner stability is rare because most people are running from themselves. They fill their calendars, their minds, their lives with distractions to avoid the discomfort of being alone. But when you stop running, when you sit quietly with yourself, you realize that the thing you were avoiding wasn't a monster. It was you, waiting to be seen, understood, and accepted. Solitude without loneliness is the art of being your own best companion. It's knowing that your worth isn't tied to your social life, your relationships, or your achievements. It's realizing that you are enough, not because of what you have or who you know, but because of who you are when everything else is stripped away. And in that realization, loneliness dissolves, not because you filled the space with people, but because you filled it with presence, your own. When you discover the peace that comes from being whole on your own, without needing the presence of others to feel complete, you unlock a deeper layer of freedom. But there's another trap waiting, even for those who've mastered solitude, the subtle addiction to praise. Even the strongest minds can fall into the habit of measuring their worth by the applause they receive. It's sneaky, often disguised as motivation or validation. But for the Stoic man, there's a truth sharper than any compliment. Your value isn't defined by who notices you. Praise feels good, no doubt. A compliment can light up your day. Recognition can boost your confidence, and being admired can make you feel powerful. But here's the problem. If your sense of worth grows with praise, it can also shrink in its absence. That's not power, that's dependence. And anything you depend on for your identity has control over you. The Stoic man doesn't reject praise because he's arrogant or indifferent to recognition. He's indifferent because he understands something most people don't. Praise is external. His worth is internal. Compliments are reflections, not definitions. They're opinions, not truths. And opinions shift like the wind. What's celebrated today can be criticized tomorrow. Relying on praise is like building your house on sand. It might stand tall when the weather's calm, but the moment the tides change, everything collapses. A Stoic man builds on solid ground. He defines himself by virtues, integrity, discipline, courage, not by the fleeting approval of others. Think about it. How often do people chase achievements, not because they love the process, but because they crave the applause that comes with success? How many decisions are made based on how others will react, rather than what aligns with personal values? This isn't living authentically, it's living for an audience. The danger isn't in praise itself, but in attaching your identity to it. When you crave recognition, you start performing instead of living. You mold yourself to fit what others admire, even if it means betraying your own values. But the applause doesn't last, and when it fades, so does the fragile sense of self built upon it. The Stoic approach is different. It's not about rejecting recognition. It's about not needing it. Whether the crowd cheers or stays silent, the Stoic remains the same. His actions are rooted in purpose, not in the reaction they provoke. He doesn't do things to be praised. He does them because they're right. This mindset creates a powerful kind of freedom. You're no longer a slave to opinions. You're not held hostage by the need to be liked, admired, or celebrated. You can make bold decisions without fearing disapproval. You can stand alone in your truth, even if no one applauds, because your validation comes from within. Indifference to praise doesn't mean you lack emotion or that you don't appreciate kind words. It means you don't depend on them. You can enjoy a compliment without it becoming the foundation of your self-worth. You can receive criticism without it shaking your identity. This level of emotional independence is rare because society conditions us to seek external approval from an early age. Good grades, social media likes, career achievements, they're all markers designed to measure success externally. But the Stoic asks a different question. Who am I when no one's watching? Who am I without the applause? The answer reveals your true character. The challenge is that praise feels rewarding because it triggers a chemical response in the brain, dopamine, the same neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and motivation. That's why recognition can feel addictive. But just like any addiction, the more you rely on it, the more you need it to feel whole. Breaking free from this cycle requires self-awareness. Notice how you react to praise. Does it boost your mood disproportionately? Do you feel the need to maintain a certain image to keep receiving it? The goal isn't to suppress these reactions, but to observe them without being controlled by them. One practice that helps is shifting focus from outcomes to process. Instead of asking, "Will this be appreciated?" ask, "Is this aligned with my values?" When you focus on the integrity of your actions, the outcome, whether praised or not, becomes less significant. You find fulfillment in the act itself, not in how it's received. Another powerful tool is self-reflection. Regularly evaluate your motivations. Are your actions driven by internal principles or external rewards? Journaling can help uncover patterns where praise-seeking behavior might be hiding. The more honest you are with yourself, the more freedom you gain. Stoic philosophy also teaches the importance of focusing on what's within your control. You can't control how people perceive you. You can't control their praise or criticism, but you can control your actions, your values, and your response. Anchoring your worth in these internal factors creates a stable foundation, unshaken by external fluctuations. Consider historical figures who embodied Stoic principles. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, wrote extensively about maintaining humility and integrity despite his status. He didn't allow the grandeur of his position to inflate his ego because he understood that titles and accolades are temporary. What lasts is character. Even in modern times, the most grounded individuals are often those who've detached their identity from external success. They can lose fame, fortune, or recognition and still stand tall because their self-worth isn't tied to these things. Their sense of value comes from who they are, not from what others think of them. Indifference to praise also strengthens resilience. When you're not addicted to approval, criticism loses its sting. You're less reactive because your worth isn't on trial every time someone disagrees with you. You can listen to feedback objectively, extract what's useful, and discard the rest without internalizing negativity. This resilience extends to failure. When success isn't about applause, failure isn't about shame. It's just part of the process. You learn, you grow, and you keep moving, not to regain approval, but to align more closely with your values. Failure becomes a teacher, not a threat to your identity. Living with indifference to praise also cultivates authenticity. You stop performing. You stop editing yourself to fit into molds crafted by societal expectations. You speak your truth, act with integrity, and make choices based on what resonates with your core, not what will win the most applause. This authenticity draws people toward you, not because you're trying to attract them, but because genuine confidence is magnetic. It's rare to meet someone who's unapologetically themselves, who doesn't seek validation, but radiates a quiet assurance rooted in self-knowledge. In relationships, this mindset creates healthier dynamics. You're not seeking partners or friendships to validate your worth. You're not trapped in cycles of people-pleasing. You engage with others from a place of wholeness, offering connection without emotional dependency. Indifference to praise also frees you from comparison. When your worth isn't measured by external metrics, someone else's success isn't a threat. You can celebrate others without feeling diminished because their achievements don't define your value. This fosters genuine support, collaboration, and peace of mind. At its core, this Stoic principle is about sovereignty, the ability to govern your own mind, emotions, and sense of self. When you reclaim this power, external noise fades. You're not swayed by trends, opinions, or societal pressures. You stand rooted, not because the world agrees with you, but because you agree with yourself. To cultivate this indifference, practice gratitude not just for praise, but for the opportunity to act with integrity, regardless of recognition. Shift your focus from external outcomes to internal growth. Value progress over perfection, effort over applause. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow, not those who inflate your ego. Seek feedback for learning, not for validation. Reflect regularly on your values, ensuring they guide your actions more than the desire for approval. Understand that praise, like criticism, says more about the person giving it than about you. It reflects their perspective, biases, and expectations. When you internalize this, both compliments and insults lose their power to define you. Remember that life is short and your energy is finite. Wasting it on the pursuit of applause is like chasing shadows. What matters is how you live, not how you're perceived. The legacy you leave isn't in the echoes of clapping hands, but in the quiet integrity of a life well lived. In the end, the Stoic man's indifference to praise isn't about dismissing recognition. It's about transcending it. It's the realization that the loudest applause fades, but the virtues you cultivate within endure. And that's where true worth resides. Not in the noise outside, but in the silent, steady beat of your own heart, aligned with your deepest values. When you no longer seek applause to validate your worth, Something unexpected happens. You become selective about who you let into your life. The need for approval fades, and with it, the need for a crowd. You realize that it's not the number of people around you that matters. It's the depth of connection with the few who genuinely align with your values. This is where the Stoic value of a small circle comes into focus. The Stoic man doesn't isolate himself from the world, but he's deliberate about his relationships. He understands that the company he keeps shapes his mind, his habits, and ultimately, his character. Not all connections nourish the soul. Some drain, distract, or pull you away from who you're meant to become. That's why few companions, chosen wisely, are worth more than 100 superficial acquaintances. In a world obsessed with social networks, followers, and endless connections, this idea feels countercultural. Society often equates popularity with success, as if the more people you know, the more valuable you are. But the Stoic man knows better. It's not about how many people know your name, it's about how many people truly know your heart. A small circle rooted in virtue offers something rare: authenticity. These are the relationships where you don't have to perform, pretend, or protect an image. You're valued not for what you can provide, but for who you are at your core. And that kind of connection doesn't happen by accident. It's built through intention, trust, and a shared commitment to growth. When your self-worth isn't tied to external validation, you stop entertaining relationships that are based on convenience or ego. You're no longer afraid to walk away from connections that lack depth, respect, or mutual growth. You choose quality over quantity. But what defines quality in relationships? For the Stoic, it's virtue. Integrity, honesty, loyalty, and wisdom form the foundation. It's not about perfection, everyone has flaws, but about alignment. Do the people in your life inspire you to be better? Do they challenge you with honesty, not just comfort you with flattery? Do they support your values, even when it's inconvenient? This selective approach isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about understanding that your energy is sacred, your time is limited, and who you spend it with influences the man you become. The Stoic man guards his inner peace by surrounding himself with people who respect it, not those who constantly disrupt it with drama, negativity, or superficiality. There's also a profound strength in having a small circle. When you're not spread thin across dozens of shallow connections, you can go deeper with the few who truly matter. These are the people who stand beside you, not just in moments of success, but in times of struggle. They're not there for the spotlight. They're there because of shared principles, not shared benefits. This kind of circle fosters growth. You're held accountable, not coddled. You're encouraged to face your flaws, not hide them. True friends don't just tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear, even when it's uncomfortable. And because these relationships are rooted in mutual respect, their words carry weight without feeling like judgment. The Stoic also understands that solitude and companionship aren't opposites. They coexist. A man secure in his solitude chooses relationships from a place of abundance, not desperation. He doesn't need people to fill a void. He connects with others to share the fullness of his life. That's the difference. When you're whole on your own, you attract connections that complement you, not complete you. Maintaining a small circle also protects your focus. The more people you allow into your inner world, the more voices you have in your head, consciously or unconsciously influencing your decisions. But with fewer trusted voices, clarity becomes easier. You're not swayed by every opinion because you've chosen wisely whose opinions even matter. Boundaries play a crucial role here. The Stoic man sets clear boundaries not to push people away, but to protect his peace and purpose. Not everyone deserves access to your time, energy, or emotional space. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters, allowing in what nurtures you and keeping out what doesn't. Choosing a small circle also teaches discernment. Not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, and not every critic is an enemy. It's easy to be fooled by charm, status, or shared interests. But true character reveals itself over time, through actions, not words. That's why the Stoic doesn't rush to label someone as a friend. Trust is earned, not given freely. This approach might seem lonely to some, but it's the opposite. There's a profound connection found in relationships where you don't have to question loyalty or intentions. Fewer people, deeper bonds, less noise, more meaning. And in times of adversity, the strength of a small, virtuous circle becomes even more apparent. When life gets tough, it's not the crowd that shows up. It's the few who genuinely care. They're not there for appearances. They're there because of genuine connection. The Stoic also recognizes that some relationships are seasonal. People come into your life for different reasons and durations. Some teach lessons, others offer companionship for a chapter, and a rare few become lifelong constants. The key is knowing when to hold on and when to let go without bitterness. Growth often requires shedding relationships that no longer align with who you're becoming. This doesn't mean cutting people off harshly. It means gracefully accepting that not every connection is meant to last forever. And that's okay. The value of a relationship isn't in its length, but in its authenticity while it lasted. Another important aspect of a small circle is reciprocity. Healthy relationships aren't one-sided. There's a balance of giving and receiving, supporting and being supported. The Stoic man doesn't keep people around just to serve his needs, nor does he stay in relationships where he's constantly drained. There's mutual respect, effort, and care. But perhaps the most powerful lesson is this: your circle reflects you. The people you keep closest often mirror your values, habits, and mindset. If you're surrounded by negativity, drama, or superficiality, it's worth asking why. Not to judge others, but to understand what you're attracting and allowing. Conversely, when you surround yourself with people of integrity, wisdom, and authenticity, their presence elevates you. You grow not just through your own efforts, but through the collective strength of the relationships you've nurtured. This doesn't mean seeking perfect people. They don't exist. It means seeking alignment, shared values, not just shared interests, mutual growth, not mutual convenience. And sometimes the most transformative relationships are the ones that challenge you the most. The friend who holds you accountable, the mentor who pushes you beyond your comfort zone, the partner who mirrors both your strengths and your flaws. These connections aren't always easy, but they're invaluable. Ultimately, the Stoic value of a small circle isn't about isolation. It's about intention. It's about curating a life where your relationships are sources of strength, not stress. Where the people around you inspire authenticity, not performance. Where loyalty isn't conditional and respect isn't negotiable. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how many people know you. It's about how deeply you're known by the few who truly matter. It's about looking around, even in your quietest moments, and knowing that while your circle may be small, it's solid, rooted in virtue, built on trust, and filled with connections that don't just accompany you in life, but enrich it. When you've built a small circle rooted in virtue, something profound becomes clear. Even the closest relationships can't replace the relationship you have with yourself. The depth of your connections with others often mirrors the depth of connection you've cultivated within. And that's where the hardest yet most transformative journey begins, facing yourself. It's easy to look outward, to analyze others, to judge their actions, to focus on external circumstances. But true growth doesn't happen out there. It happens when you turn inward, when you sit alone with your thoughts, without distractions, without the comfort of external validation, and confront the raw, unfiltered truth about who you are. This isn't just self-awareness, it's self-confrontation, and it takes courage. Because it's one thing to be strong in front of the world. It's another to be strong when there's no one watching, no applause to mask the silence, no distractions to cover the discomfort. To face yourself is to stand in front of a mirror that doesn't lie. It reflects not just your strengths, but your weaknesses, your fears, your regrets, and the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. Most people avoid this kind of reflection because it's uncomfortable. It's easier to stay busy, to fill life with noise, to focus on the flaws of others rather than acknowledge our own. But avoidance comes with a cost. What you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It grows in the shadows. Insecurity, guilt, unresolved pain, they fester when left unchecked. The Stoic understands that avoiding discomfort only leads to greater suffering in the long run. But when you face your flaws head-on, something powerful happens. They lose their power over you. You're no longer controlled by hidden fears because you've brought them into the light. You've acknowledged them, examined them, and in doing so, transformed them. Self-reflection isn't about self-judgment. It's not about labeling yourself as good or bad. It's about observation, seeing yourself clearly, without distortion. It's about asking, what drives my actions? What beliefs shape my decisions? Where am I out of alignment with my values? This kind of honesty isn't always flattering, but it's liberating. Because once you see the truth, you can change it. Facing yourself also means confronting the narratives you've built over time, the stories you tell yourself about who you are, what you're capable of, and what you deserve. Many of these stories are outdated, shaped by past experiences, fears, or the expectations of others. But they're not facts, they're just stories, and through reflection, you get to rewrite them. This process requires stillness. You can't reflect deeply in the middle of chaos. That's why solitude is essential, not as an escape, but as a space for clarity. When the noise fades, your true thoughts emerge. At first, this can feel overwhelming. You might uncover emotions you've buried, mistakes you've ignored, or desires you've suppressed. But these revelations are gifts. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge. The Stoic practice of journaling is a powerful tool for this kind of introspection. Writing forces clarity. It slows down your thoughts, allowing you to examine them from different angles. It's not about crafting perfect sentences. It's about capturing your raw, unfiltered truth. Over time, you begin to notice patterns, recurring fears, limiting beliefs, emotional triggers, and with awareness comes the power to change. Another key aspect of self-reflection is understanding your values. Many people drift through life reacting to circumstances without ever defining what truly matters to them. But the Stoic doesn't leave this to chance. He defines his values intentionally: courage, wisdom, discipline, integrity, and then measures his actions against them. This alignment creates a sense of inner peace because you're living authentically, not just reacting to external pressures. Reflection also involves examining your emotional landscape. Emotions aren't enemies to be suppressed, they're signals. Anger might reveal a boundary that's been crossed. Envy might highlight a desire you've neglected. Fear might point to an area where you lack confidence. Instead of judging these emotions, the Stoic observes them with curiosity, asking, "What is this feeling trying to teach me?" But self-reflection isn't just about looking back. It's about looking forward with intention. It's about asking, who am I becoming? Are my current habits, thoughts, and choices leading me in that direction? This future-oriented reflection helps you course-correct before you drift too far from your values. One of the most challenging parts of facing yourself is accepting your imperfections. The Stoic doesn't strive for flawlessness. He understands that mistakes are part of being human. What matters isn't avoiding failure, it's how you respond to it. Do you hide from it, or do you learn from it? Do you let it define you, or do you use it as a catalyst for growth? Acceptance doesn't mean complacency. It means acknowledging where you are without shame, while still striving to become better. It's holding space for both self-compassion and self-discipline. You're not excusing your flaws, but you're not letting them crush you either. You're saying, "This is who I am right now, and I'm committed to growth." The courage to face yourself also involves owning your responsibilities. It's easy to blame circumstances, other people, or the past for our current struggles. But the Stoic knows that true power comes from radical accountability. Even if you didn't cause a situation, you're responsible for how you respond to it. This mindset shifts you from being a victim of life to being an active participant in your own growth. Reflection also helps you identify areas where you've been living on autopilot, habits, routines, or thought patterns that no longer serve you. It's like updating outdated software. Just because something worked for you in the past doesn't mean it's aligned with who you are now. Self-reflection is the process of consciously choosing how you want to live, rather than unconsciously repeating the past. Another aspect of facing yourself is confronting your fears, not the external ones, but the internal fears that limit your potential. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. The Stoic doesn't pretend these fears don't exist. He examines them, challenges them, and often discovers that most fears are illusions, powerful only because they've been left unexamined. Reflection also reveals your strengths, not the superficial achievements, but the deeper qualities that sustain you. Resilience in the face of adversity, compassion when it's hard to give, discipline when motivation fades. Recognizing these strengths builds confidence, not the fragile kind based on external validation, but the quiet assurance that comes from knowing who you are at your core. The process of self-reflection isn't linear. Some days you'll feel clarity and growth. Other days you'll feel lost or frustrated. That's normal. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. It's the willingness to keep showing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, because the alternative, living disconnected from your own truth, is far more painful in the long run. Facing yourself also involves examining your relationships. Are they reflections of your values, or are they driven by fear, obligation, or habit? Do the people around you challenge you to grow, or do they keep you stuck in old patterns? Sometimes the hardest part of self-reflection is realizing that growth requires letting go, not just of beliefs, but of relationships that no longer align with who you're becoming. Another layer of self-reflection is exploring your purpose, not as a grand singular mission, but as the underlying why behind your actions. What drives you beyond external success? What kind of person do you want to be regardless of circumstances? Purpose isn't found, it's created, shaped by the choices you make every day. And then there's the reflection on mortality. The Stoics practice this not to be morbid, but to gain perspective. Life is finite. Time is precious. When you reflect on the reality that your days are limited, it sharpens your focus. What really matters? What are you holding on to that's not worth your time? What dreams are you postponing as if you'll live forever? This awareness doesn't create fear. It creates urgency, clarity, and gratitude. It reminds you to live intentionally, to cherish the present, to pursue what truly matters without delay. At the heart of all this is self-honesty. The courage to face yourself isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. It's the willingness to see both your light and your shadow without flinching. To say, "This is who I am, with all my strengths and flaws, and I'm committed to becoming the best version of myself." In the end, the Stoics' journey through self-reflection isn't about achieving some final state of enlightenment. It's about the ongoing process of becoming. Every moment of honesty, every uncomfortable realization, every shift in perspective, it all adds up. Not to a perfect life, but to a meaningful one. A life lived with intention, integrity, and courage, not just in the eyes of the world, but in the quiet, unfiltered gaze of your own reflection. When you found the courage to face yourself, stripped away the illusions, confronted your flaws, and embraced your strengths, something profound begins to shift. You no longer crave the spotlight. The need to be seen, validated, or constantly acknowledged starts to lose its grip. That's because once you know who you are at your core, external recognition becomes irrelevant. This is where quiet confidence is born, a confidence that thrives not on applause, but on purpose. The world often tells us that to matter, we must be noticed. We're conditioned to equate visibility with value. Social media, career achievements, social circles, they all push the narrative that if people aren't watching, your efforts don't count. But for the Stoic, this couldn't be further from the truth. True fulfillment comes not from being seen, but from being aligned with your purpose, even when no one is watching. The man who's secure in his purpose doesn't perform. He lives. His actions are not a show designed to impress others. They are authentic expressions of who he is. This kind of man walks into a room and doesn't need to announce his worth. His presence speaks for itself. Not because he's loud, but because his confidence is rooted so deeply within that it doesn't need validation to exist. Why is this freedom from the need to be seen so powerful? Because it removes the invisible chains that hold most people back. When you live for recognition, you become a prisoner to it. Your decisions are shaped by what others might think. Your self-worth rises and falls based on external reactions. But when you detach from that need, you reclaim your autonomy. You're no longer performing, you're living authentically. This doesn't mean rejecting all forms of acknowledgement. It's natural to appreciate recognition. The key is not to be dependent on it. When your sense of self is so fragile that it requires constant affirmation, you're handing your power over to the world. But the Stoic's confidence is different. It's self-sustaining. It doesn't need to be fed by external applause because it's fueled from within. How do you cultivate this quiet confidence? It starts with purpose. When you're clear on why you do what you do, the opinions of others lose their weight. You're not chasing approval. You're following a deeper calling. This purpose doesn't have to be grand or world-changing. It can be as simple as living with integrity, pursuing personal growth, or mastering your craft. The point is that it's yours, not borrowed from societal expectations. Another layer is embracing self-validation. Instead of asking, "Did they notice?" or "Do they approve?" you ask, "Did I show up fully? Did I act in alignment with my values?" This shift changes everything. You start measuring success based on personal growth and integrity, not external applause. The Stoic also understands that true confidence is often quiet, because it doesn't need to be loud. It's not about arrogance or dominance. It's about a steady, unshakable sense of self that doesn't fluctuate with circumstances. Think of the calm presence of someone who's grounded. You feel their strength, not because they're boasting, but because it's genuine. This kind of confidence also fosters resilience. When you're not driven by the need to be seen, failure loses its sting. You're not afraid to stumble because your worth isn't tied to public perception. You can take risks, learn from mistakes, and keep growing because your identity isn't fragile. It's rooted in something far more durable: self-trust. Freedom from the need to be seen also brings peace. Constantly performing for others is exhausting. It requires endless energy to manage impressions, maintain facades, and chase external approval. But when you let go of that, you create space for authenticity. You're no longer burdened by the question, "What do they think of me?" Instead, you focus on what truly matters. Am I living in alignment with who I am? This shift doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others. You can still care deeply, build meaningful relationships, and contribute to the world. The difference is that your actions are driven by purpose, not performance. You're not living for the applause. You're living for the meaning behind what you do. Consider the people you admire most. Often, their strength comes not from how loudly they demand attention, but from the depth of their authenticity. They're respected because they stand firm in who they are, even when it's not popular. They don't need the spotlight because their presence carries its own light. The Stoic's quiet confidence also allows for humility. When you're secure in yourself, you don't need to prove anything. You can admit mistakes, acknowledge what you don't know, and celebrate others without feeling diminished. Your worth isn't fragile, so it's not threatened by growth, change, or challenge. This kind of confidence fosters genuine connections. When you're not trying to impress, you create space for real, honest relationships. People are drawn to authenticity because it's rare. In a world full of performances, someone who's simply real is magnetic, not because they seek attention, but because they're free from the need for it. To cultivate this freedom, practice detachment from external validation. Notice when you're making decisions based on how they'll be perceived rather than what aligns with your values. It's subtle but powerful. Ask yourself, would I still do this if no one ever knew about it? If the answer is yes, you're acting from authenticity. Another practice is embracing solitude, not as isolation, but as a space to reconnect with yourself. When you spend time alone, without distractions, you begin to hear your own voice more clearly. You realize that your worth isn't found in how others respond to you. It's found in the quiet recognition of who you are when the world isn't watching. Mindfulness also plays a role. Being present helps you notice when you're slipping into performance mode. Are you speaking to be heard or to share something meaningful? Are you acting out of genuine passion or out of fear of being overlooked? Awareness is the first step to breaking free from these patterns. Journaling can deepen this awareness. Reflect on moments when you felt the need to be seen. What was driving that? Insecurity, fear of irrelevance, the desire for connection. When you understand the root, you can address it without judgment. Over time, this reflection builds self-awareness and resilience. It's also important to redefine success. Instead of measuring it by recognition or applause, define it based on your own growth, integrity, and impact. Success isn't about how many people notice you. It's about how aligned you are with your purpose. When you shift this definition, you liberate yourself from the endless chase for validation. The Stoic also practices gratitude, not for external achievements, but for internal growth. Gratitude anchors you in the present, reminding you that fulfillment comes from within, not from the fleeting highs of external approval. It helps you appreciate the journey, not just the recognition that might come along the way. Another key is to embrace impermanence. Public opinion is fickle. Today's praise can turn into tomorrow's criticism. When you accept this, you stop chasing something so unstable. You realize that lasting fulfillment comes from within, not from the ever-changing tides of external validation. Freedom from the need to be seen also enhances creativity. When you're not creating for an audience, you're free to explore, experiment, and express authentically. You're not bound by expectations. You're guided by curiosity and passion. This authenticity often resonates more deeply than anything designed to impress. At the heart of this freedom is self-trust, trusting that who you are, without performance, is enough. Trusting that your value isn't conditional. This trust is built over time, through consistent alignment with your values, through facing challenges with integrity, and through embracing both your strengths and imperfections. This doesn't mean you'll never feel the pull for recognition. It's human to want to be seen and appreciated. The difference is that you're aware of it. You don't let it drive your actions. You acknowledge it without being controlled by it. That's true freedom, not the absence of desire, but the absence of dependence. The Stoic's quiet confidence isn't loud because it doesn't need to be. It's not about convincing others of your worth. It's about knowing it so deeply that no one else's opinion can add to it or take away from it. It's the steady flame that burns regardless of whether anyone's watching. And that flame lights the path to a life lived not for the crowd, but for something far more meaningful, for the truth of who you are. When you break free from the need to be seen, you realize how liberating it is to exist without constantly performing for others. That quiet confidence grows not in crowded rooms, but in spaces where no one is watching. And this leads to an even deeper realization. Solitude isn't just a condition, it's a teacher. There are lessons about life, about yourself, and about the nature of existence that can only be learned in isolation. When the noise fades, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Isolation strips away the distractions we often use to avoid ourselves. The constant chatter, the endless scroll, the busy schedules, they all keep us from sitting with the raw, unfiltered reality of who we are. But when all that's gone, what's left is something most people spend their lives avoiding: themselves, their thoughts, their fears, their unfulfilled dreams, their regrets. And yet, it's in that very space, uncomfortable, quiet, and raw, where transformation happens. The first lesson isolation teaches is self-reliance. When there's no one to lean on, no immediate feedback, and no external validation, you learn to stand on your own. You realize that your strength isn't dependent on the support of others. It's something you build from within. This isn't about rejecting help or connection. It's about discovering that even when you're completely alone, you're still enough. You are your own foundation. Isolation also reveals the difference between loneliness and solitude. At first, they can feel the same, an empty room, a quiet phone, long stretches of time with no one around. But over time, you begin to see that loneliness is about absence, while solitude is about presence. Loneliness focuses on what's missing. Solitude focuses on what's here, yourself. It's not the absence of others that defines solitude. It's the presence of self-awareness, self-reflection, and inner peace. Another powerful lesson is the clarity that comes when distractions are gone. In daily life, it's easy to drown out your inner voice with noise, music, conversations, deadlines, entertainment. But in isolation, there's nowhere to hide. Your thoughts rise to the surface, unfiltered. At first, this can be overwhelming. You may face regrets you've buried, fears you've ignored, or truths you've been unwilling to accept. But with time, you realize that these thoughts aren't your enemies. They're messengers. They reveal what's unresolved, what needs attention, and what's been holding you back. Through this process, isolation teaches you to be comfortable with discomfort. In modern life, we're conditioned to avoid anything unpleasant. We reach for our phones when we're bored, distract ourselves when we're sad, and fill every moment to avoid stillness. But in isolation, discomfort is inevitable, and that's where the growth happens. Instead of running from it, you sit with it, you observe it, you understand it, and eventually you move through it. Not because it's gone, but because it no longer controls you. Another lesson is the power of reflection. When you're isolated from the constant stimulation of the outside world, you have the space to look inward. You start to question things you never had time to consider. What truly matters to me? Am I living in alignment with my values? Have I been following my own path or just doing what's expected? These questions can't be answered in passing thoughts. They require silence, patience, and the courage to face whatever answers arise. Isolation also reveals the nature of time. In daily life, time feels like it's always slipping away. Meetings, deadlines, appointments. But in solitude, time stretches. Hours feel longer, days feel fuller. At first this can feel unsettling, as if you're not doing enough, but eventually you realize that time isn't something to chase or manage. It's something to experience. You become more present, more aware of the details you usually overlook. The way the light shifts during the day, the rhythm of your breath, the subtle changes in your thoughts. This presence leads to another lesson: contentment without external stimulation. We often believe we need constant activity, entertainment, or social interaction to feel fulfilled. But isolation shows that contentment doesn't come from what you do. It comes from how you relate to yourself. When you find peace in simply being, without the need for distractions, you realize that true happiness isn't dependent on circumstances. It's an internal state, cultivated through acceptance and self-awareness. Isolation also teaches resilience. When you're alone with your thoughts, you face every doubt, every insecurity, every fear, without anyone there to reassure you. At first, this feels like vulnerability, but over time, you discover that facing these emotions head-on makes you stronger. You learn that you can handle discomfort, fear, and uncertainty without falling apart. This resilience isn't built through avoiding challenges, but through embracing them fully, even when no one else is around to witness it. Another profound lesson is the understanding of impermanence. In isolation, you observe the natural flow of life without interference. You notice how emotions rise and fall, how thoughts come and go, how nothing stays the same. This realization can be both humbling and freeing. You see that no feeling is permanent, no situation is static. Everything changes, and learning to flow with that change rather than resist it brings a deep sense of peace. Isolation also helps you redefine success. In the absence of external achievements, titles, or recognition, you begin to question what truly matters. Without the usual markers of progress, you realize that success isn't about what you accumulate. It's about who you become. It's not about the destination. It's about the integrity of the journey. Are you living with honesty, courage, and purpose? Are you growing even in small ways every day? These are the measures that matter in solitude. Moreover, isolation sharpens your intuition. When you're constantly surrounded by opinions, advice, and noise, it's easy to lose touch with your inner voice. But in solitude, that voice becomes clearer. You start to trust your instincts, make decisions based on your values, and navigate life with a sense of internal guidance rather than external influence. Another lesson is the value of simplicity. Without the distractions of daily life, you realize how little you actually need to feel content. Simplicity isn't about deprivation, it's about clarity. It's recognizing that fulfillment comes not from having more, but from appreciating what you already have. When you strip away the excess, you find what's essential. And often, what's essential isn't material. It's connection to self, purpose, and presence. Isolation also fosters creativity. When your mind isn't constantly reacting to external stimuli, it starts to generate ideas from within. You begin to see connections you never noticed before, to think deeply, and to explore new perspectives. Creativity isn't just about art or innovation. It's about how you approach life, how you solve problems, and how you express your unique view of the world. One of the most challenging yet transformative lessons of isolation is self-acceptance. Without the mirrors of society reflecting back who you should be, you're left with who you truly are. This can be confronting. You might face parts of yourself you've tried to hide, flaws, mistakes, regrets. But in that raw honesty, you find freedom. Self-acceptance isn't about liking every part of yourself. It's about embracing the whole, without shame or denial. It's saying, "This is me, imperfect and evolving, and that's enough." Isolation also deepens your understanding of interdependence. Paradoxically, spending time alone can make you appreciate connection even more, not from a place of neediness, but from a place of gratitude. You realize that while you don't need constant companionship to feel whole, meaningful relationships enrich life in ways that solitude can't replace. This awareness leads to healthier, more authentic connections because they're chosen, not clung to. Another lesson is the distinction between control and influence. In solitude, you become acutely aware of how little you can control. Thoughts arise without permission, emotions fluctuate, life unfolds unpredictably. But instead of feeling powerless, you learn where your true influence lies, in how you respond. You can't control everything, but you can choose your perspective, your actions, and your attitude. This shift from control to influence is both empowering and grounding. Isolation also teaches patience. Without the rush of external demands, you slow down, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. You learn to sit with discomfort without trying to fix it immediately, to allow things to unfold in their own time, and to appreciate the process rather than just the outcome. Patience isn't passive, it's an active choice to trust the flow of life. Isolation teaches you about freedom, not the external kind, but the internal freedom that comes from knowing you're not defined by circumstances, roles, or the opinions of others. It's the freedom to be unapologetically yourself, to live authentically, and to find peace within, regardless of what's happening outside. In the end, isolation isn't about being cut off from the world. It's about reconnecting with yourself, with your values, and with the deeper truths that often get lost in the noise of everyday life. It's in these quiet, unguarded moments that you meet yourself, not as the world sees you, but as you truly are. And in that meeting, you discover not just who you've been, but who you're capable of becoming. When solitude strips away life's distractions and teaches you to face the raw truth of who you are, something sacred emerges, inner peace. But discovering peace is only part of the journey. The real challenge is protecting it. The world doesn't pause just because you've found clarity. People's demands, expectations, and emotional chaos continue, often pulling you into their storms. This is where the Stoics' discipline comes into play, guarding your peace by being fiercely selective about the relationships you allow into your life. It's easy to underestimate how much influence others have over your mind. A single conversation can shift your mood, a toxic person can drain your energy, and a constant need to please others can quietly erode your sense of self. Peace isn't just about what you create internally, it's also about what you allow externally. A Stoic understands this. He doesn't see boundaries as walls to isolate himself, but as filters that protect his tranquility from unnecessary chaos. At the core of this practice is the realization that not everyone deserves access to your life. Relationships aren't obligations, they're choices. Just because someone has been in your life for years doesn't mean they should remain if their presence costs you peace. Familiarity isn't the same as value. Time doesn't validate a relationship. Respect, mutual growth, and emotional integrity do. Being selective with relationships isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about alignment. Do the people in your life align with your values, or do they pull you away from them? Are they reflections of who you're becoming, or reminders of who you're trying to outgrow? The Stoic man isn't afraid to ask these questions, not out of judgment, but out of self-respect. The first step in guarding your peace is recognizing emotional energy as a finite resource. Just like your physical energy, it can be depleted. Every interaction, no matter how small, has an energetic cost. Some people leave you feeling lighter, inspired and grounded. Others leave you drained, anxious, or questioning your worth. The difference often lies not in what's said, but in the emotional dynamic beneath the surface. Expectations, manipulations, unspoken resentments. That's why the Stoic is mindful of emotional exchanges. He doesn't engage in conflicts that lead nowhere. He doesn't argue to prove a point, especially when it's clear the other person isn't open to understanding. He values his peace more than the fleeting satisfaction of being right. This doesn't mean avoiding confrontation when necessary. It means choosing battles wisely, with the understanding that not everything deserves a reaction. Setting boundaries is at the heart of this process. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about controlling what you allow. They define where you end and someone else begins, what behaviors you accept, what energy you entertain, and how you protect your mental space. A Stoic sets boundaries not out of fear, but out of clarity. This is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is what I won't compromise. Enforcing boundaries often reveals the true nature of relationships. People who respect you will respect your boundaries. Those who benefit from crossing them will resist, and that resistance can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to being the person who accommodates, pleases, or avoids conflict. But here's the truth. Every time you honor your boundaries, you strengthen your self-respect. Every time you betray them, you weaken it. Guarding your peace also means being intentional about who you give your time to. Time is the most valuable currency because you can't get it back. The Stoic doesn't spend it mindlessly, especially on people who drain more than they give. He understands that quality trumps quantity. A handful of authentic, uplifting relationships are worth more than a crowd of superficial connections. This selectiveness isn't about perfection. No one is flawless, and every relationship has its challenges. The key is recognizing patterns. Do challenges lead to growth, or do they create cycles of toxicity? Are conflicts resolved with mutual respect, or do they chip away at your well-being over time? The Stoic evaluates relationships with honesty, not sentimentality. Another layer of guarding your peace is learning to be okay with disappointing people. This is hard, especially if you're wired to seek approval. But the truth is, you can't protect both your peace and everyone's expectations. At some point, you have to choose. The Stoic chooses peace, not out of selfishness, but out of the understanding that he's responsible for his own well-being, not the comfort of others. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. Stoicism isn't about shutting people out. It's about engaging with life authentically. It's possible to be kind without being a doormat, compassionate without being consumed, and supportive without sacrificing your own mental health. Boundaries create space for genuine connection because they're built on honesty, not hidden resentment. Guarding your peace also involves detaching from emotional entanglements that aren't yours to carry. People will project their fears, insecurities, and frustrations onto you. Not every problem presented to you is yours to solve. The Stoic practices emotional detachment, not as a lack of empathy, but as a recognition of where his responsibility ends. You can support someone without drowning with them. You can listen without absorbing. This mindset extends to social environments as well. The Stoic isn't afraid to walk away from spaces that don't align with his values. He doesn't force himself to fit into places where he doesn't belong, just to avoid discomfort. Whether it's toxic work environments, draining friendships, or situations that compromise his integrity, he knows that peace often requires the courage to leave. Another important aspect is the language we use with ourselves. Guarding your peace isn't just about external boundaries, it's also about internal dialogue. How you speak to yourself can either be a source of tranquility or turmoil. The Stoic cultivates self-awareness, noticing when negative thought patterns arise and gently redirecting them. He doesn't allow his inner critic to be louder than his inner wisdom. Mindfulness is a powerful tool in this process. By staying present, you become more attuned to shifts in your energy. You notice when a conversation feels heavy, when an environment feels draining, or when a relationship feels one-sided. Mindfulness helps you catch these moments early, allowing you to respond intentionally rather than reactively. Practicing detachment from outcomes is another way to guard your peace. Often, stress comes from trying to control things beyond your influence, other people's opinions, decisions, or reactions. The Stoic focuses on effort, not outcome. I'll show up with integrity, do my part, and let go of what's beyond me. This mindset reduces anxiety because it shifts attention from what's uncontrollable to what's within your power. Part of protecting your peace also involves honoring your own needs without guilt. Rest isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Saying no isn't rude, it's respectful to yourself and others. Taking time alone isn't selfish, it's self-care. The Stoic doesn't equate busyness with worth or overextending with virtue. He knows that when his cup is empty, he has nothing meaningful to give. Another lesson is the power of silence. Not every situation requires a response. Not every comment deserves your energy. The Stoic understands the value of pausing, allowing silence to speak when words aren't necessary. Sometimes peace isn't found in solving a conflict, but in choosing not to engage with it at all. Guarding your peace also requires self-reflection. Regularly check in with yourself. What's draining me? What's nourishing me? Where am I compromising my well-being? These questions help you recalibrate, ensuring that your boundaries evolve as you grow. What served you once might not serve you now, and that's okay. Growth often requires shedding, not just adding. Remember that guarding your peace isn't about control, it's about alignment. It's not about manipulating circumstances to create a perfect life. It's about creating inner stability regardless of life's chaos. The Stoic doesn't wait for life to be peaceful to feel peace. He carries it within, not as something fragile, but as something fiercely protected. In the end, guarding your peace is an act of self-respect. It's recognizing that your well-being isn't negotiable. It's choosing to live intentionally, surrounded by relationships and environments that reflect the life you're committed to building. And in that space, where your boundaries are clear, your energy is protected, and your heart is aligned, you find not just peace, but freedom. When you learn to guard your peace, setting boundaries around your time, energy, and emotions, something profound happens. You realize that true peace doesn't just come from what you keep out, but from what you build within. It's not enough to protect your tranquility. You have to fill that space with something meaningful. And that's where the Stoic's greatest lesson comes in. Lasting contentment isn't found in others, achievements, or circumstances. It's cultivated through a life rooted in virtue. We often chase fulfillment in external things, relationships, success, recognition, material comforts, believing that once we have enough, we'll finally feel complete. But the Stoics knew this was an illusion. External things are temporary. They change, fade, or disappear altogether. If your happiness depends on them, your peace will always be fragile. True fulfillment isn't something you find. It's something you create by living in alignment with your values. At the heart of Stoicism is the idea that virtue is the only true good. Not wealth, not status, not pleasure. Virtue. But what does that mean? Virtue isn't about moral perfection or rigid rules. It's about living with integrity, courage, wisdom, and self-discipline. It's about making choices that reflect the kind of person you want to be, even when no one is watching. When your actions align with your values, you experience a deep sense of inner peace that external success could never provide. The beauty of this philosophy is its simplicity. You don't need to control the world to find contentment. You just need to control yourself. You don't need to win every battle, achieve every goal, or impress every person. You only need to be true to your principles. That's where real power lies, in knowing that your well-being isn't at the mercy of life's unpredictability. Consider the virtue of wisdom. It's not just about knowledge, it's about understanding how to navigate life thoughtfully. Wisdom helps you see things clearly, without the distortion of ego, fear, or impulse. It guides you to respond rather than react, to pause and reflect, instead of rushing to judgment. When you live with wisdom, you make decisions that support your long-term well-being, not just temporary comfort. Then there's courage. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Life will always present challenges, difficult conversations, personal losses, moments of doubt. But courage isn't about eliminating fear. It's about refusing to let fear dictate your actions. When you act with courage, you build self-trust. You prove to yourself that you can face discomfort without compromising who you are. Self-discipline is another cornerstone of Stoic virtue. It's the ability to delay gratification, resist impulses, and stay committed to your values, even when it's hard. In a world that rewards instant gratification, discipline might seem restrictive, but it's the opposite. Discipline is freedom. It frees you from being controlled by fleeting desires, unhealthy habits, or emotional volatility. It helps you build a life that's meaningful, not just momentarily satisfying. And then there's justice, not just in the legal sense, but in how you treat others. It's about fairness, integrity, and contributing to the greater good. When your actions are guided by a sense of justice, you experience a kind of fulfillment that self-centered pursuits can't offer. Because true contentment isn't just about what you get from life, it's about what you give. When you live with virtue, you shift from asking, "What can I get?" to "Who can I become?" And that shift changes everything. External achievements become secondary to internal growth. Success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by how authentically you live. And failure isn't something to fear because it doesn't define your worth. Your worth comes from your character, not your outcomes. This doesn't mean you stop pursuing goals or enjoying life's pleasures. Stoicism isn't about denial. It's about detachment. You can appreciate success without being defined by it. You can enjoy relationships without being dependent on them for your sense of self. You engage fully with life, but your core remains steady, untouched by its highs and lows. Living with virtue also changes how you view adversity. Most people see challenges as obstacles to happiness, but the Stoic sees them as opportunities to practice virtue. A difficult situation isn't just a problem to solve. It's a chance to develop patience, resilience, or humility. This mindset transforms suffering from something to avoid into something that can deepen your growth. For example, when faced with loss, you can't control your grief, but you can choose how you respond. Do you let it harden you, or do you allow it to teach you compassion? When someone wrongs you, you can't control their actions, but you can decide whether to respond with bitterness or with dignity. Every challenge becomes a teacher, every struggle an invitation to grow. This approach creates a profound sense of inner security. You're no longer at the mercy of life's unpredictability because your peace doesn't depend on external stability. It comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you have the strength to face it with integrity. That's a kind of fulfillment that can't be shaken by circumstances. Another powerful aspect of living with virtue is the clarity it brings. When you're clear on your values, decisions become easier. You're not torn between competing desires because you have a compass guiding you. You don't waste energy on things that don't matter because you know what does. This clarity reduces stress, anxiety, and the endless search for more because you're already rooted in what's essential. Living this way also fosters self-respect. When you consistently act in alignment with your values, you build a deep trust in yourself. You no longer need external validation because you know who you are. You don't fear judgment because your sense of worth isn't up for negotiation. And you don't feel empty when you're alone because your fulfillment comes from within. This inner fulfillment also enhances your relationships. When you're not seeking others to complete you, you connect from a place of wholeness. You're not looking for someone to fill a void. You're sharing your fullness. This creates healthier, more authentic connections because they're based on mutual respect, not neediness or control. Moreover, living with virtue helps you let go of resentment and bitterness. When your focus is on your own growth, you don't waste energy trying to control others. You accept that people will disappoint you, that life will be unfair at times, but none of that can rob you of your peace unless you let it. Forgiveness becomes easier, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve the freedom it brings. Gratitude is another natural result of this way of living. When you're not constantly chasing external validation, you start to appreciate the simple things: a quiet moment, a meaningful conversation, the beauty of nature. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's already here. And in that shift, you realize that fulfillment isn't about having everything. It's about recognizing that you already have enough. Living with virtue also means embracing imperfection. You'll make mistakes. You'll fall short. You'll act out of fear or ego sometimes. But the Stoic doesn't strive for perfection. He strives for progress. Every misstep is an opportunity to learn, to reflect, to adjust. Self-compassion isn't a weakness. It's a recognition that growth is messy, and that's okay. This mindset creates resilience. When your self-worth isn't tied to being flawless, you're not afraid to take risks, to try new things, to fail. Failure isn't a reflection of your value. It's part of the process. And because your focus is on living with integrity, not on achieving specific outcomes, you can navigate life's ups and downs without losing yourself. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is that virtue is always within your control. You may not control what happens around you, but you always control how you respond. That's where your freedom lies. Not in changing the world, but in choosing who you'll be in the face of it. And that choice, made consistently over time, creates a life of depth, meaning, and lasting contentment. In the end, fulfillment isn't a destination you reach after achieving certain goals. It's the byproduct of how you live each day. It's found in the small, consistent choices to act with courage, to speak with honesty, to treat others with kindness, to pursue wisdom, and to stay true to yourself, even when it's hard. That's the essence of the Stoic's path. Not a life free from struggle, but a life rich with purpose, grounded in virtue, and filled with a peace that no one can take away. When you root your life in virtue, you find fulfillment that no external achievement can match. You realize that genuine contentment doesn't come from what the world thinks of you, but from how closely your actions align with your values. This realization naturally leads to another truth: the illusion of popularity. Many chase after recognition, applause, and approval, thinking these are the markers of success. But for the Stoic, these pursuits are hollow echoes, fleeting shadows that distract from what truly matters. Popularity is a mirage. It looks enticing from a distance, promising validation and significance, but the closer you get, the more you realize how empty it is. Applause fades, crowds move on, and the admiration of others can shift with a single mistake or a change in trends. What's celebrated today is forgotten tomorrow. The Stoic rejects this chase not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. He knows that tying your self-worth to public opinion is like building a house on sand, unstable, fragile, and destined to collapse. Why is popularity so seductive? Because it taps into a basic human need, the desire to be seen, heard, and valued. But there's a difference between genuine connection and the superficial attention that popularity offers. True value doesn't come from being known by many. It comes from being deeply understood by a few, and most importantly, by yourself. The Stoic seeks authenticity, not admiration. He would rather be unknown and at peace than celebrated and restless inside. The problem with seeking validation from the crowd is that it's never enough. Approval is addictive. The more you get, the more you crave, because it's not filling a real need. It's just covering up insecurity. Every compliment feels good for a moment, but it fades quickly, leaving you chasing the next one. It becomes a cycle, performing, pleasing, seeking recognition, and feeling empty again when it's gone. It's an endless treadmill that goes nowhere. But when your sense of worth comes from within, you're free. You're no longer living for an audience. You're not adjusting your identity to fit others' expectations. You know who you are, and that's enough. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to others or isolate yourself from society. It means you engage authentically without the need to be constantly validated. The Stoic understands that fame and recognition are outside of our control. You can't make people like you, admire you, or approve of you, not in any lasting way. Even if you achieve popularity, it's fragile. It depends on factors you can't control: trends, opinions, circumstances. And the moment you try to hold on to it, you become its prisoner. You start making decisions not based on what's right, but on what will maintain your image. This is where many people lose themselves. They become performers in their own lives, playing roles to keep others happy, to fit in, to be liked. But the Stoic rejects this. He doesn't play roles. He lives with integrity, even if it means standing alone. Because at the end of the day, it's better to be at peace with yourself than to be admired by others for someone you're not. There's also a cost to popularity that people rarely consider: the loss of authenticity. When your focus is on being liked, you start to suppress parts of yourself that don't fit the image you're trying to maintain. You hide your flaws, your true opinions, your vulnerabilities. But authenticity is where real connection happens. You can't be truly seen if you're always wearing a mask. The Stoic values depth over breadth. He'd rather have a few meaningful relationships than be surrounded by countless superficial ones. Popularity often creates the illusion of connection, but it's not the same as real belonging. It's easy to gather attention. It's much harder to find people who accept you for who you are, not for what you can offer them. Another trap of popularity is that it shifts your focus outward. Instead of asking, "Am I living in alignment with my values?" you start asking, "What do people think of me?" This shift is dangerous because it disconnects you from your internal compass. You start making decisions based on external reactions rather than internal convictions. Over time, you lose sight of who you really are. But the Stoic stays grounded by focusing on what's within his control: his thoughts, actions, and character. He measures success not by how many people applaud, but by how consistently he lives according to his principles. He understands that true self-worth isn't built on fragile foundations like fame or approval. It's built on integrity, courage, and wisdom, qualities that don't require an audience. When you let go of the need for popularity, you gain something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom to speak your truth without fear of judgment. Freedom to make decisions based on what's right, not what's popular. Freedom to be yourself, fully and unapologetically. And with that freedom comes peace, a peace that external validation can never provide. This doesn't mean the Stoic avoids recognition altogether. If your work is excellent, people may notice. If your actions are inspiring, they may earn respect. But the difference is in the motivation. The Stoic doesn't act for applause. He acts because it aligns with his values. If recognition comes, fine. If it doesn't, also fine. The outcome doesn't define the value of the action. In fact, sometimes the most meaningful work is done in silence, unnoticed by the world. Think of those who make sacrifices, show kindness, or act with integrity when no one is watching. Is their contribution any less valuable because it wasn't publicized? Of course not. In many ways, it's more powerful because it was done purely, without the need for external validation. The Stoic also recognizes that popularity can be a distraction. The pursuit of it consumes time and energy that could be spent on things that actually matter: personal growth, meaningful relationships, purposeful work. When you're constantly focused on how you're perceived, you have little space left for self-reflection and genuine living. Moreover, popularity often comes with expectations. The more people admire you, the more pressure you feel to maintain a certain image. You become trapped by your own success, afraid to show any weakness, to evolve, or to change direction. But the Stoic doesn't fear change because his identity isn't tied to how others see him. He's free to grow, to make mistakes, to learn, because his self-worth isn't on the line. Another illusion is that popularity equals happiness. But look at the lives of many who've achieved fame. Often they're filled with anxiety, loneliness, and dissatisfaction. That's because external success can't fix internal emptiness. No amount of followers, likes, or praise can fill the void that comes from living out of alignment with your true self. The Stoic's contentment comes from a different source. It's quiet, steady, and self-sustaining. It doesn't depend on the applause of the crowd, but on the inner satisfaction of living with purpose and virtue. And ironically, this kind of authentic, grounded life often inspires others, not because it's trying to, but because authenticity is rare and magnetic. In rejecting the illusion of popularity, the Stoic also embraces humility. He knows he's not superior or inferior to anyone. He doesn't need to be the center of attention to feel valuable. His worth is inherent, not conditional. This humility allows him to connect with others genuinely, without the need for status games or power dynamics. Rejecting popularity doesn't mean rejecting community. The Stoic values meaningful connections, but he chooses them intentionally. He surrounds himself with people who challenge him to grow, who value authenticity over appearance, and who respect him for who he is, not for what he can provide. This creates relationships built on substance, not performance. The Stoic also accepts that being true to yourself sometimes means being misunderstood. Not everyone will like you. Not everyone will agree with you. And that's okay. The goal isn't to be universally accepted, but to be authentic. When you're grounded in your values, the opinions of others lose their power over you. You can listen to feedback without being defined by it. Living this way requires courage. It's easier to conform, to seek approval, to fit in. But conformity comes at the cost of your authenticity. The Stoic chooses the harder path, not because it's difficult, but because it's true. He'd rather face rejection for who he really is than receive praise for a version of himself that isn't real. At the end of the day, popularity fades, but character endures. The people who truly inspire us aren't the ones who chased applause. They're the ones who stood firm in their values, even when it wasn't popular. They didn't seek recognition, but their authenticity left an impact that outlasted their moment in the spotlight. So, the Stoic's advice is simple. Don't waste your life chasing approval. Focus on becoming someone you respect, not someone the crowd admires. Because when the noise fades and the spotlight moves on, what's left is you, your character, your choices, your integrity. And that's what truly matters. When you see through the illusion of popularity, you realize that the approval of others is fleeting, fragile, and ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of your life. What truly matters is not how many people applaud when you walk into a room, but how well you know and control yourself when the room is empty. And this realization leads to the Stoic man's greatest pursuit, self-mastery. Self-mastery isn't about dominance over others, it's about authority over yourself. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're not controlled by your impulses, fears, or external circumstances. While many people spend their lives trying to conquer the world around them, the Stoic understands that the most significant victory is the one within. The battle isn't out there, it's inside your own mind. This kind of mastery doesn't shout for attention. It's not loud, boastful, or flashy. It's silent, steady, and profound. It's the calmness you feel when chaos erupts around you because you've trained your mind not to react without thought. It's the strength to walk away from situations that don't deserve your energy, the discipline to do what's right even when no one's watching, and the resilience to face life's storms without losing your center. At its core, self-mastery is about self-awareness. You can't control what you don't understand. Most people go through life on autopilot, reacting to emotions and external triggers without questioning why. But the Stoic man pauses. He observes his thoughts, examines his feelings, and asks hard questions. Why do I feel this way? What am I afraid of? Am I acting out of impulse or intention? This level of introspection isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Because once you identify the forces pulling your strings, you can begin to cut them. Self-mastery also requires discipline. Not the rigid, harsh kind that's all about punishment, but the discipline that comes from a deep commitment to your values. It's about consistency over intensity. Anyone can be disciplined for a day or two, motivated by a burst of inspiration, but true mastery is shown in what you do when motivation fades. It's waking up early because you said you would, not because you feel like it. It's holding your boundaries even when it's uncomfortable. It's sticking to your principles when compromise would be easier. But self-mastery isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming a stoic robot without feelings. It's about understanding your emotions, accepting them, and choosing how to respond. Anger, fear, sadness, they're all part of the human experience. The difference is that the Stoic doesn't let these emotions dictate his actions. He feels them fully, but he acts from reason, not reaction. Another crucial aspect is delayed gratification. In a world obsessed with instant results, likes, notifications, fast food, quick fixes, the ability to delay gratification is a superpower. The Stoic knows that meaningful growth takes time. Mastery isn't found in shortcuts, it's forged in patience. Whether it's building skills, developing character, or achieving goals, he's willing to put in the work day after day without needing immediate rewards. Self-mastery also means taking radical responsibility for your life. It's easy to blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck for your problems. But the Stoic doesn't waste time pointing fingers. He focuses on what he can control: his actions, his mindset, his responses. Even when life is unfair, even when others are at fault, he asks, "What can I do about it?" Because that's where his power lies. This mindset creates a profound sense of inner freedom. Most people are slaves to their emotions, habits, and the opinions of others. They're trapped by their need for approval, their fear of failure, or their addiction to comfort. But the Stoic man is free because he's not ruled by these things. His mind is his own, unshaken by external forces. This doesn't mean life is easy for him. It means that no matter how hard life gets, he remains sovereign over himself. Consistency is another key element of self-mastery. It's not about occasional grand gestures. It's about small, deliberate actions repeated over time. It's doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. It's practicing self-control when temptation calls. It's maintaining your standards, not just when life is smooth, but especially when it's challenging, because mastery isn't proven in comfort, it's revealed in adversity. This journey also requires humility. Self-mastery isn't about thinking you've arrived or that you're better than others. In fact, it's the opposite. The more you grow, the more you realize how much you don't know. A Stoic man isn't driven by ego. He's driven by a desire to continuously improve. He's open to feedback, willing to admit when he's wrong, and unafraid to start over when needed. This humility isn't weakness, it's strength. Because only those secure in themselves can face their flaws without defensiveness. Another vital aspect is detachment from outcomes. We live in a results-driven world, where success is often measured by external achievements. But the Stoic focuses on the process, not the outcome. He doesn't obsess over what he can't control, like other people's reactions or the final result. Instead, he pours his energy into what he can control, his effort, his integrity, his growth. This detachment doesn't mean he's indifferent. It means he's free from the emotional roller coaster of constant expectations. Mental resilience is a natural byproduct of self-mastery. Life will test you: loss, failure, rejection, disappointment. But the Stoic doesn't crumble because his strength isn't built on fragile foundations like success or approval. It's built on character. He knows that adversity isn't an obstacle, it's a teacher. Challenges don't break him, they reveal him. And with each trial, he becomes more unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because he gets stronger. Self-mastery also involves clarity of purpose. When you know what you stand for and where you're headed, distractions lose their power. The Stoic doesn't chase every shiny object or get lost in meaningless pursuits. He moves with intention, guided by his values and vision. This clarity isn't rigid. It allows for growth and adaptation, but it keeps him anchored, preventing him from drifting through life without direction. A significant part of this journey is learning to be alone with yourself. In solitude, there's no one to impress, no distractions to hide behind, just you and your thoughts. Many avoid this because it's uncomfortable. But the Stoic embraces it because he knows that true self-awareness comes from facing yourself fully. When you can sit in silence and be at peace with who you are, that's mastery. Emotional regulation is another pillar. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding and managing them. You feel anger, but you don't let it control you. You experience fear, but you don't let it paralyze you. This regulation isn't about being emotionally numb. It's about responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. Self-compassion is also essential. Mastery isn't perfection. You'll make mistakes, fall short, and face moments of weakness. But the Stoic doesn't dwell in guilt or self-pity. He acknowledges his flaws, learns from them, and moves forward. Growth isn't linear, and mastery isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time you do. Another critical element is the practice of deliberate reflection. The Stoic regularly examines his thoughts, actions, and decisions, not to judge himself harshly, but to understand, adjust, and improve. Reflection is how you turn experience into wisdom. It's how you ensure you're not just moving through life, but growing through it. Patience is woven into every part of this journey. Mastery takes time. There are no shortcuts, no quick fixes. The Stoic understands that meaningful change happens gradually. It's the result of small, consistent efforts, compounded over time. Impatience leads to frustration and burnout, but patience fosters resilience and lasting growth. Authenticity is the foundation of self-mastery. The Stoic doesn't wear masks or play roles to fit in. He lives in alignment with his true self, even when it's uncomfortable. He speaks his truth, honors his values, and stays rooted in who he is, regardless of external pressures. This authenticity creates a deep sense of inner peace, because there's no gap between who he is and how he lives. Self-mastery is about freedom, not from external constraints, but from internal ones. Freedom from fear, from the need for approval, from the grip of impulses and insecurities. It's the ability to live life on your terms, guided by your principles, grounded in your values, and confident in your path. It's not a destination, but a continuous journey, a daily practice of showing up for yourself with integrity, discipline, and purpose. And in that quiet, steady pursuit, the Stoic finds the greatest achievement of all, not conquering the world, but conquering himself. When you reach the quiet confidence of self-mastery, something profound begins to unfold. You realize that true strength isn't just about controlling your actions or disciplining your mind. It's about owning your emotions. Because even the most disciplined mind can be shaken if it relies on others for emotional stability. This is where the Stoic's path leads to an even deeper layer of resilience: emotional self-reliance. Emotional self-reliance isn't about shutting down your feelings or pretending you don't need anyone. It's about building an unshakable inner fortress, a place where your peace isn't vulnerable to the chaos outside of you. It's the ability to stand strong, not because life is easy, but because you've cultivated the tools to handle life's storms from within. Most people unknowingly outsource their happiness. They tie their emotional well-being to things they can't control: relationships, jobs, social approval, even the weather. When those external sources shift, as they inevitably do, their inner world crumbles. One disagreement ruins their day. A rejection shatters their confidence. A setback makes them question their worth. But the Stoic refuses to live like that. For the Stoic, happiness isn't a transaction with the outside world. It's not, "I'll feel good when things go my way." It's, "I'll feel grounded because I've built that foundation within myself, regardless of what's happening around me." This kind of emotional independence doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care deeply, but wisely. You feel emotions fully, but you're not enslaved by them. At the core of emotional self-reliance is the understanding that you are responsible for how you feel, not your past, not your circumstances, not other people. This isn't about denying pain or pretending life doesn't hurt sometimes. It's about recognizing that while you can't control every event, you can always control how you interpret and respond to those events. That's where your power lies. One of the first bricks in this inner fortress is self-awareness. You can't manage what you don't understand. Most emotional reactions come from unconscious patterns, old wounds, unexamined beliefs, habitual thinking. The Stoic practices observing his emotions without judgment. Why am I feeling this? Where is it coming from? Is this reaction based on reality, or is it a story I'm telling myself? This kind of reflection helps separate facts from feelings, allowing you to respond with clarity instead of reacting blindly. Another key element is acceptance, not the passive kind that says, "Oh well, life is hard," but the active kind that acknowledges reality without resistance. When you stop fighting what is, you free up energy to deal with it effectively. This doesn't mean you like every situation. It means you don't waste time wishing it were different when your focus could be on what you can control. Emotional self-reliance also involves detachment, not from life, but from the illusion of control. Many emotional struggles come from trying to control things that aren't ours to control: how others think, how situations unfold, how the future will play out. The Stoic focuses on his sphere of influence, his actions, his mindset, his character. Everything else is observed with calm awareness, not obsessive attachment. Boundaries are another critical component. Emotional self-reliance doesn't mean you're unaffected by people. It means you don't let their behavior dictate your inner state. You can empathize without absorbing. You can support without sacrificing your peace. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're filters to protect your well-being. The Stoic is clear about what energy he allows into his life because he knows his peace is priceless. A powerful practice in this journey is emotional regulation. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings or pretending to be above emotions. It's about creating space between the feeling and the reaction. When anger arises, the Stoic doesn't lash out. He observes it, understands it, and chooses his response. When fear shows up, he doesn't let it paralyze him. He acknowledges it, examines the source, and acts based on reason, not anxiety. This emotional discipline isn't about being cold or detached. It's about being deeply connected to your feelings, but not controlled by them. The Stoic feels grief, disappointment, frustration, but these emotions don't define him. He doesn't drown in them because he's anchored in something deeper: his values, his principles, his sense of self. Another layer of emotional self-reliance is self-validation. Most people seek external approval to feel worthy. They need compliments to feel confident, agreement to feel secure, attention to feel valued. But the Stoic's self-worth isn't on the auction block for others to bid on. He defines his value by his own standards. He knows who he is, what he stands for, and what matters to him. Praise doesn't inflate him, and criticism doesn't deflate him, because his sense of self isn't up for negotiation. Gratitude is also a cornerstone of emotional independence, not the superficial kind that lists things to sound positive, but the deep recognition of what's already good, even amidst challenges. Gratitude shifts focus from lack to abundance, from what's missing to what's present. It grounds you in the reality that while life may not be perfect, there's always something meaningful to anchor you. The Stoic also practices emotional minimalism. This doesn't mean feeling less. It means being selective about what deserves your emotional energy. Not every comment needs a reaction. Not every problem is yours to solve. Emotional minimalism is about conserving your inner resources for what truly matters, rather than being drained by every little thing. A critical part of this is learning to sit with discomfort. Many people are emotionally reactive because they fear negative feelings. They rush to distract themselves, numb out, or fix the situation immediately. But the Stoic knows that discomfort is a teacher, not an enemy. He doesn't run from it. He sits with it, listens to it, and lets it pass naturally. In doing so, he builds resilience. the understanding that feelings are temporary waves, not permanent states. Another powerful tool is reframing. The Stoic challenges his interpretations of events. Is this really a catastrophe or just an inconvenience? Is this rejection a failure or a redirection? Is this loss the end or the beginning of something new? By changing the lens through which he views life, he changes his emotional experience of it. This isn't toxic positivity, it's cognitive clarity. Emotional self-reliance also involves self-compassion. Many people are their own harshest critics, believing that self-judgment will drive improvement. But the Stoic understands that growth comes from reflection, not punishment. Self-compassion isn't about making excuses. It's about creating a supportive inner environment where growth can thrive. When you treat yourself with the same understanding you'd offer a friend, you create emotional stability from within. Mindfulness is another foundational practice. It's the ability to observe your thoughts and feelings without being swept away by them. Mindfulness creates space, the gap between stimulus and response where choice lives. The Stoic uses this space to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This isn't about suppressing emotions, but witnessing them with curiosity and calm. A key realization in emotional self-reliance is that no one else is responsible for your happiness. Relationships can enhance your life, but they can't complete you. Achievements can be fulfilling, but they aren't the source of your worth. The Stoic enjoys life's pleasures, but isn't dependent on them. His joy is an inside job. This doesn't mean isolation. The Stoic values connections, but doesn't rely on them for emotional survival. He can be alone without feeling lonely because his own company is enough, and when he's with others, he shows up authentically, not as someone seeking to be filled, but as someone already whole. Resilience naturally grows from this mindset. Life will challenge you. Loss, failure, betrayal. But when your foundation is internal, you bend without breaking. You grieve without being destroyed. You feel fear without being paralyzed. You face uncertainty without losing yourself. Emotional resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about trusting your capacity to move through it. Part of building this inner fortress is recognizing the power of choices. You can't control every emotion that arises, but you can choose what you do with it. You can choose to pause instead of react. You can choose to speak with integrity instead of anger. You can choose to focus on what's within your control instead of spiraling into what's not. These choices, made consistently, create emotional stability. Another lesson is that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. Emotional self-reliance doesn't mean you never ask for help or express your feelings. It means you do so from a place of authenticity, not dependency. You share because you choose to, not because you need others to fix you. Vulnerability becomes a bridge for connection, not a plea for validation. Purpose also plays a role in emotional independence. When you have a sense of meaning beyond yourself, setbacks feel smaller and challenges feel more manageable. Purpose gives context to pain, turning suffering into growth. The Stoic aligns his actions with his values, knowing that a life of purpose creates a deeper fulfillment than fleeting emotions ever could. Emotional self-reliance is a practice, not a destination. You don't wake up one day fully unshakable. It's built day by day, decision by decision. It's in the small moments, choosing to breathe instead of react, reflect instead of spiral, stand firm instead of collapse. And over time, these small choices create a fortress so strong that no external storm can breach it. In the end, the Stoic doesn't aim to be emotionless. He aims to be anchored, anchored in self-awareness, anchored in purpose, anchored in the unchanging truth that his peace comes from within, not from the unpredictable tides of life. When you build emotional self-reliance, you discover a strength that doesn't waver with the shifting tides of opinions and circumstances. You no longer seek approval to feel whole because your sense of worth is anchored within. But there's another layer to this freedom, the ability to be misunderstood without feeling the need to explain, defend, or justify who you are. This is where true liberation begins. To be misunderstood and remain unbothered is the highest form of emotional independence. It's the ultimate detachment, not from people themselves, but from the prison of their expectations. Most people live under an invisible weight, constantly adjusting their words, actions, even dreams to fit into molds crafted by society, family, or peers. They fear judgment like it's a verdict on their worth. But the Stoic sees judgment for what it really is, an opinion, not a truth. Think about it. People's judgments are shaped by their experiences, biases, fears, and expectations. What they think of you often has more to do with them than with you. And yet, many spend their lives performing for an audience that doesn't even fully understand them. The Stoic refuses to live this way. He knows that to chase universal approval is to sacrifice authenticity, and nothing is more valuable than living true to oneself. Being misunderstood isn't a flaw. It's proof that you're living authentically. It means you're not bending, twisting, or diluting yourself to fit into someone else's narrative. The need to be understood by everyone is a trap because it's impossible. No matter how carefully you choose your words or how perfectly you behave, there will always be someone who misinterprets, disapproves, or disagrees. The Stoic doesn't waste energy trying to control that. This isn't about arrogance or dismissiveness, it's about clarity. The Stoic understands that his value doesn't fluctuate based on external perceptions. Whether praised or criticized, admired or dismissed, he remains steady because his identity isn't built on fragile foundations like popularity or acceptance. His self-worth is rooted in his character, not in how others perceive it. One of the most liberating realizations is that you don't owe anyone an explanation for being yourself. The world will project expectations onto you, how you should live, what you should believe, who you should be. But none of that is your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live in alignment with your values. When you stop trying to be understood, you create space to simply be. Ironically, the more authentic you are, the more likely you are to be misunderstood. Authenticity challenges comfort zones, disrupts conformity, and defies easy categorization. People prefer what's familiar, predictable, and easy to label. When you step outside those boundaries, it unsettles them. But that's not your burden to carry. Freedom from the need to be understood allows you to move through life with lightness. You're not constantly editing yourself for different audiences. You're not trapped in the exhausting cycle of over-explaining, overthinking, or overcompensating. You speak your truth, live your values, and let others interpret as they will. Their interpretations don't touch your core. This mindset doesn't mean you reject feedback or live in an echo chamber. The Stoic is open to reflection and growth, but he filters feedback through the lens of reason. He asks, is this critique valid and aligned with my principles, or is it just someone's projection? If it's useful, he learns from it. If not, he lets it go, without resentment, without defensiveness. The fear of being misunderstood often comes from the illusion that agreement equals connection. But real connection doesn't require perfect understanding. It requires authenticity. When you show up as your true self, you attract people who resonate with who you genuinely are, not a version you've curated to be liked. And even if you're misunderstood, that doesn't diminish the depth of your authenticity. In fact, being misunderstood can be a sign that you're growing. When you evolve, you outgrow old dynamics, challenge outdated beliefs, and disrupt familiar patterns. People who knew the old version of you might not understand the new one. That's okay. Growth isn't meant to be universally palatable. It's meant to be true. Consider historical figures who dared to live differently. Philosophers, artists, leaders. They were often misunderstood, criticized, even rejected in their time. But they didn't let that stop them. Their focus wasn't on pleasing the crowd, it was on living with purpose. The Stoic draws strength from this. He knows that standing firm in your truth sometimes means standing alone, and that's not loneliness, that's integrity. Another layer of freedom comes from realizing that you don't have to correct every misunderstanding. There's a temptation to defend yourself, to clarify, to make sure people get it. But not every misconception deserves your time or energy. Silence can be a powerful response. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that your peace is more valuable than winning an argument. The need to be understood often masks the deeper fear of rejection. But when you release that fear, rejection loses its sting. The Stoic knows that rejection doesn't define him. It reveals where alignment doesn't exist. And why would you want alignment with people who only accept you when you fit their expectations? True freedom is walking away from spaces where you have to shrink to fit. This mindset fosters resilience. When you're not fragile in the face of misunderstanding, criticism doesn't break you. It's just noise, background static, irrelevant to the clarity of your inner signal. This doesn't mean you become indifferent or numb. It means you're grounded. Your emotional well-being isn't at the mercy of external opinions. Paradoxically, the less you seek to be understood, the more authentic connections you create. People are drawn to those who are unapologetically themselves because it gives them permission to do the same. Authenticity is magnetic, not because it tries to attract, but because it simply exists without pretense. There's also a profound peace in realizing that you're not responsible for managing other people's perceptions. You're not the curator of their narratives about you. You're the author of your own life. The pages you write are yours, not dictated by how others interpret them. Some will read them with clarity, others will miss the point entirely. That's not your concern. Being misunderstood also teaches you to let go of perfectionism. The desire to be perfectly seen, known, and accepted is a recipe for constant disappointment. But when you accept that imperfection is part of the human experience, yours and others, you release the impossible standard of universal comprehension. You stop performing and start living. In relationships, this mindset creates healthier dynamics. You don't need constant reassurance or validation. You communicate honestly, knowing that not everyone will fully get you, and that's okay. Misunderstandings happen. Differences exist. Connection doesn't require perfect alignment. It requires mutual respect. Creativity flourishes when you're not afraid of being misunderstood. Many hold back their ideas, art, or passions out of fear they won't be received correctly. But the Stoic knows that the value of creation isn't in the reaction it gets, it's in the act itself. Expression is its own reward. Whether people applaud, criticize, or overlook it doesn't diminish its authenticity. Freedom from the need to be understood also cultivates humility. You don't have to prove you're right, smart, or worthy. You just are. You can say, "This is who I am," without attaching your identity to others' approval. This humility isn't self-deprecation. It's self-assurance without arrogance. In moments of doubt, the Stoic returns to a simple question: am I living in alignment with my values? If the answer is yes, external opinions lose their grip. Whether misunderstood or celebrated, his peace remains intact because it's rooted in integrity, not image. This mindset also reduces conflict. When you don't need to be right, you don't need to argue. You can listen without defensiveness, engage without ego, and walk away without resentment. Silence becomes a choice, not a submission. You choose where to invest your energy, and often peace is found in choosing not to engage with every misunderstanding. Ultimately, being misunderstood is a kind of freedom most never taste because they fear it too much to embrace it. But the Stoic walks boldly into that space, knowing that true connection starts with self-connection. When you're at peace with yourself, others' confusion can't disturb that peace. So, live your truth, even if it confuses people. Speak your mind, even if it challenges norms. Be who you are, even if it doesn't fit the script others have written for you. Because the moment you stop needing to be understood, you start truly understanding yourself. And that's the freedom worth living for. When you embrace the freedom of being misunderstood, you shed the weight of living for others' expectations. You realize that validation isn't necessary for authenticity, but this revelation opens another door. The recognition that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. In fact, solitude is often where the deepest truths about yourself are uncovered. This is where the Stoic draws a vital distinction. Solitude is strength, while loneliness is an illusion. At first glance, solitude and loneliness might seem like two sides of the same coin. Both involve being alone, but that's where the similarity ends. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of self-awareness. Loneliness whispers, "You're missing something," while solitude says, "You've found yourself." The difference isn't in the external situation, it's in the internal experience. Loneliness craves company to fill a void. It's rooted in the belief that without others, something is lacking. It feeds on comparison, insecurity, and the fear of being forgotten or unseen. But solitude isn't about filling a void. It's about realizing there was never one to begin with. It's the powerful realization that your own presence is enough. For the Stoic, solitude is not a punishment or a sign of failure. It's a practice. It's where clarity sharpens, reflection deepens, and resilience grows. It's in these quiet moments, free from distractions and noise, that you face your thoughts head-on. There's no one to impress, no roles to play, just you and the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. Many fear solitude because it strips away the comforting distractions of busyness and noise. Without those distractions, you're left with yourself, and that can be unsettling if you haven't built a relationship with your inner world. But the Stoic sees this as an opportunity, not a threat. Solitude isn't the absence of people, it's the presence of depth. In solitude, you confront your fears, your desires, your regrets, and that confrontation is the first step to growth. You can't heal what you don't face, and you can't face it if you're always surrounded by noise. The Stoic understands that true strength comes from this inner reckoning, from the ability to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. Loneliness, on the other hand, thrives on the illusion that external connection is the only cure for inner emptiness. But no amount of company can fill a void that's rooted in disconnection from yourself. People chase relationships, social media, validation, or constant activity to avoid the quiet. But the emptiness they fear isn't the absence of others. It's the absence of self-awareness. The irony is that you can feel profoundly lonely in a crowd and completely content in solitude. Loneliness isn't about physical isolation, it's about emotional disconnection. Solitude, however, is about intentional connection with your thoughts, your values, your purpose. It's a space where you don't need to perform, explain, or justify. You simply exist, and that's enough. The Stoic doesn't avoid solitude, he seeks it, because in solitude there's no audience, no external expectations, just the truth. This is where integrity is tested. Who are you when no one's watching? What choices do you make when there's no applause or criticism to influence you? Solitude reveals your true character because there's nowhere to hide. But solitude isn't just about introspection, it's also about creation. Many of the world's greatest ideas, works of art, and philosophical insights were born in solitude. Without the constant noise of the external world, the mind has space to think deeply, to wander, to connect dots that are often missed in the rush of daily life. Solitude isn't emptiness, it's fertile ground for growth. The fear of solitude often comes from the belief that we're not enough on our own, that without someone to validate us, our worth diminishes. But the Stoic knows that self-worth isn't granted by others, it's discovered within. When you realize that your value isn't dependent on external connections, solitude transforms from a threat into a sanctuary. This doesn't mean the Stoic rejects relationships. He values meaningful connections, but he doesn't rely on them for his sense of self. His relationships are enriched because they come from a place of wholeness, not neediness. He doesn't seek others to complete him, he seeks to share his completeness with others. Solitude also teaches self-sufficiency. When you're comfortable in your own company, you're not afraid of being alone. You don't settle for toxic relationships just to avoid loneliness. You choose your connections based on alignment with your values, not fear of isolation. This kind of self-sufficiency breeds confidence because you know you can stand on your own, even when life gets tough. The Stoic views solitude as a mirror. It reflects who you really are, not who you pretend to be. It shows you your strengths, but it also confronts you with your weaknesses. And while that can be uncomfortable, it's also liberating, because when you face your flaws, you gain the power to change them. Avoiding them only keeps you stuck. There's also a profound freedom in solitude. You're not bound by social roles, expectations, or the need to perform. You can think without filters, feel without judgment, and be without pretense. In solitude, you belong completely to yourself. And when you belong to yourself, no one can take that from you. Many people confuse loneliness with boredom. They fear that without constant stimulation, life will feel empty. But boredom is just the surface layer. If you sit with it long enough, it dissolves, revealing deeper thoughts, insights, and creativity. Solitude isn't the absence of activity, it's the presence of awareness. The Stoic also understands that solitude strengthens resilience. Life is unpredictable. People come and go, circumstances change, relationships evolve. If your stability is dependent on external factors, you're vulnerable. But if you've cultivated inner stability through solitude, you're prepared. You can face loss, change and uncertainty without losing yourself. Solitude isn't a void. It's a vessel. It holds space for reflection, growth, creativity, and peace. It's where you process experiences, integrate lessons, and connect with your core. Without solitude, life becomes a constant stream of input with no space for understanding. Reflection requires room to breathe. One of the greatest gifts of solitude is clarity. When you step back from the noise, you can see things more clearly, your goals, your values, your priorities. You're not influenced by the latest trend, the loudest opinion, or the pressure to conform. You make decisions from a place of authenticity, not from a desire to fit in. Loneliness often whispers, "You're not enough." Solitude replies, "You are." It's not about avoiding people, it's about finding peace within, so that when you do connect with others, it's from a place of abundance, not scarcity. You're not seeking to be filled, you're sharing what's already full. The Stoic also knows that solitude fosters gratitude. When you spend time alone, you become more present. You notice the small details, a quiet morning, the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of your breath. Solitude teaches you to appreciate what's often overlooked in the rush of daily life. Embracing solitude requires courage. It means facing parts of yourself that are easy to ignore when you're constantly distracted. But it's in that courageous confrontation that growth happens. You meet your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, and you realize they don't define you. Solitude is not isolation. Isolation is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of purpose. It's not about withdrawing from life, but engaging with it more deeply. When you're comfortable in your own company, you carry that peace with you wherever you go. You're not dependent on external circumstances to feel whole. In the end, the Stoic understands that solitude is where you meet yourself, not the version shaped by others' expectations, but the authentic, unfiltered, raw essence of who you are. And in meeting yourself, you discover a strength that doesn't waver, a peace that doesn't fade, and a freedom that no one can take away. Loneliness is an illusion. It tells you that you're incomplete without someone else. But solitude reveals the truth. You were never incomplete to begin with. You've always been whole. You just needed the quiet to hear it. When you understand that solitude is not loneliness, but a space for clarity, you start to see it differently, not as an emptiness to be filled, but as fertile ground for something deeper. It's in this quiet, away from the distractions of the world, that something remarkable happens. You begin to meet your true self. Without the constant noise, the expectations, the roles you play and the masks you wear, you're left with the most authentic version of you. This isn't just a byproduct of solitude. It's the transformation that Stoicism guides you through. Solitude doesn't isolate you from growth. It's the very soil where growth takes root. Discovering your true self isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, a continuous unfolding. The Stoics understood that the noise of life, external validation, societal pressures, the constant buzz of comparison, can drown out your inner voice. But when the noise fades, what's left is the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. Not who you've been told to be, not who you think you should be, but who you truly are at your core. At first, this can be uncomfortable. When you strip away distractions, you're faced with your own thoughts, fears, and unspoken truths. There's no one to blame, no external situation to hide behind. It's just you, confronting the parts of yourself you might have ignored. But this confrontation isn't a punishment, it's a gift, because you can't grow into your highest self if you're afraid to meet yourself where you are. Stoicism teaches that self-knowledge is the foundation of a meaningful life. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, didn't write for an audience. He wrote to himself to understand his mind, his motivations, his values. This act of self-reflection wasn't about judgment, it was about clarity. He knew that to lead with wisdom, he first had to face his own inner world. The first step in this transformation is awareness. Most people go through life on autopilot, reacting to circumstances without questioning why they feel or act the way they do. But solitude breaks the cycle of automatic living. It gives you space to pause and ask, who am I when no one's watching? What drives me? What fears am I hiding from? What do I truly value? These questions aren't easy, and the answers aren't always comfortable. You might discover that some of your goals aren't even yours. They're inherited from societal expectations or family pressures. You might realize that habits you've clung to don't serve you anymore. This realization isn't meant to create shame. It's meant to create freedom. Because once you see the truth, you can choose differently. Solitude also reveals your strengths. When you're not performing for an audience, you notice qualities that aren't dependent on external validation. You realize you're resilient, not because someone praised you, but because you faced challenges and kept going. You discover courage, not in the absence of fear, but in your ability to act despite it. One of the most powerful shifts that happens in solitude is the move from external focus to internal alignment. In the noise of daily life, it's easy to measure yourself by external metrics, success, popularity, possessions. But in solitude, those markers fade, and you're left with deeper questions. Am I living in alignment with my values? Does my life reflect who I truly am? This alignment is where peace comes from, not the fleeting peace that comes from everything going well, but the unshakable peace that comes from knowing you're living your truth. Even when life is chaotic, even when challenges arise, there's a steadiness inside you because you're not fragmented by pretending to be someone you're not. Growth through solitude also comes from reflection. The Stoics didn't just sit in silence, they actively engaged with their thoughts. They examined their beliefs, questioned their assumptions, and challenged their own biases. Reflection isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about learning from it. It's the process of turning experience into wisdom. But reflection isn't just about looking backward. It's also about envisioning forward, asking who you want to become. The Stoic doesn't seek perfection because perfection is an illusion. Instead, he seeks progress, grounded in self-awareness. He doesn't define himself by past mistakes, but by his commitment to growth. Another key lesson from solitude is self-acceptance, not the passive kind that says, "This is just who I am," but the active kind that acknowledges both strengths and flaws with honesty. You can't change what you refuse to acknowledge. But when you accept yourself fully without judgment, you create space for transformation. You're not fighting against yourself, you're working with yourself. Solitude also clarifies your values. In the noise of the world, it's easy to adopt values that aren't truly yours. But in the quiet, you can ask, what do I stand for? What matters to me beyond what others think? When you know your values, decisions become clearer. You're not swayed by trends or peer pressure because you have an internal compass. Resilience is another gift born from solitude. When you face yourself fully, you realize that you can handle discomfort, uncertainty, and even pain. You've been through hard things, and you're still here. This realization builds confidence, not the shallow kind based on achievements, but the deep, quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own strength. Creativity flourishes in solitude as well. Without constant input from the outside world, your mind has space to explore, to connect dots in new ways, to hear the whispers of ideas that get drowned out in the noise. Some of the greatest works of art, literature, and philosophy were born from periods of deep solitude. Because creativity isn't just about producing, it's about listening, reflecting, and allowing ideas to unfold. Self-discipline grows in solitude. Without external accountability, you learn to be accountable to yourself. You discover that motivation is fleeting, but discipline, rooted in purpose, carries you through. You don't need someone watching over you to do the right thing because you've internalized your values. Gratitude deepens in solitude. When you slow down, you notice the small things. A quiet morning, the feel of the sun, the rhythm of your breath. Gratitude isn't just about what you have, it's about how you see. Solitude sharpens your vision, helping you find richness in simplicity. One of the most transformative aspects of solitude is learning to be comfortable with uncertainty. Life doesn't come with guarantees, and trying to control everything is exhausting. In solitude, you confront the reality that not everything is within your control, and that's okay. You learn to sit with the unknown without spiraling into anxiety because you trust yourself to navigate whatever comes. Freedom emerges from this trust. The freedom to live authentically, to make choices based on your values rather than fear, to let go of what no longer serves you. You're not trapped by the past or anxious about the future, because you've anchored yourself in the present, in who you are right now. But solitude isn't just about the self. It transforms how you show up in the world. When you know yourself deeply, you connect with others more authentically. You're not seeking validation, you're offering genuine presence. Your relationships are rooted in mutual respect, not dependency. Solitude also fosters empathy. When you've sat with your own struggles, you become more compassionate toward others. You understand that everyone has an inner world as complex as yours, filled with hopes, fears, and contradictions. This awareness doesn't make you judgmental. It makes you kind. Clarity about your purpose often emerges in solitude. When you're not chasing external markers of success, you can ask, what gives my life meaning? What am I here to contribute? Purpose isn't always a grand mission. Sometimes it's found in the small, everyday ways you live your values. But it's purpose that gives your actions depth. Courage grows in solitude too. The courage to face yourself, to sit with uncomfortable truths, to admit when you're wrong, to change, to grow. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the willingness to move forward despite it. And solitude is the training ground for that kind of courage. Self-compassion flourishes in solitude. You realize you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You can hold space for both your strengths and your struggles without judgment. Self-compassion isn't indulgence. It's the foundation for resilience and growth. Ultimately, solitude reveals that you've always had what you were looking for: the strength, the clarity, the peace. It was never out there. It was within you all along. The noise of life just made it hard to hear. But in the quiet, in the stillness, you find not just yourself, but the vastness of your own potential. Stoicism doesn't teach solitude as isolation. It teaches it as integration. The integration of your experiences, your values, your purpose, your truth. It's not about escaping life, but engaging with it more fully because you know who you are, beneath the roles, the expectations, the noise. So, when you sit in solitude, remember, it's not an absence, it's a presence. The presence of your truest self, waiting to be seen, heard, and embraced, not by the world, but by you. And that discovery, that's the beginning of everything. After walking through the depths of solitude, self-mastery, and the quiet strength that comes from within, one truth stands unshaken. A man with no friends or a very small circle isn't lacking. He's secure. His power doesn't come from the noise of the crowd, but from the clarity of his own mind. His confidence isn't borrowed from applause, but built through discipline, reflection, and unwavering self-respect. We've explored how solitude isn't a weakness, it's a fortress. It sharpens the mind, reveals the truth, and fosters emotional resilience. A man who stands alone isn't empty. He's full of purpose. He doesn't fear judgment because he's not here to perform. He doesn't crave validation because his worth is self-defined. He knows the difference between loneliness and solitude, between popularity and peace, between noise and wisdom. This is the essence of true security. When your sense of self isn't held together by the fragile threads of external approval, but by the unbreakable fabric of inner strength. A man like this isn't afraid to walk alone, because he's never truly alone. He carries himself, his values, and his purpose wherever he goes. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this resonated with you the most? Have you experienced the power of solitude, or the freedom that comes from not needing the crowd's approval? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you found value in this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more insights that challenge,